The hands trembled. Not much, just enough that someone paying attention might notice. Sarah Kincaid pressed her palms flat against the cold metal of the weapons locker, willing the shaking to stop. Behind the locker door, hidden where no one could see, a silver flask caught the fluorescent light, half empty or half full, depending on how you measured failure. She didn't reach for it. Not yet. Not at 0600 with a full day ahead and eyes that would be watching. Always watching. The armory at Fort Bragg smelled the same as it had 4 years ago when she'd first walked through these doors. Gun oil and concrete, sweat and purpose, the particular scent of a place where warriors prepared for war. But Sarah wasn't a warrior anymore. She was a ghost, a maintenance technician who cleaned weapons and checked serial numbers and tried very hard to be invisible. The M4 carbine felt familiar in her hands. 47 seconds. That's how long it took her to complete a full inspection. Chamber clear, bolt carrier group smooth, firing pin alignment perfect, extractor tension optimal, gas tube unobstructed. 47 seconds exactly. Not 46, not 48. The same time it had taken her on a rooftop in Raqqa when the world was ending and every second mattered. Her fingers moved without thought, muscle memory carved so deep it bypassed consciousness entirely. Check, verify, confirm. The ritual of the living making sure the tools of death would function when called upon. Some part of her recognized the irony. She'd spent 4 years trying to forget how to kill, and here she was, making sure others could do it efficiently. The morning light crept through the high windows of the armory, painting everything in shades of gray. Sarah had always been an early riser. Even before the Navy, before the SEALs, before everything that came after. Her father had been military. Army, 3 tours in the first Gulf War, came home with a Bronze Star and nightmares that made him scream in his sleep. He died when she was 16. Heart attack, the doctor said. But Sarah had seen the pills, the drinking, the way his eyes went somewhere else. When the 4th of July fireworks started, the war had killed him. Just took 15 years to finish the job. She understood that now. A flash of memory, uninvited, unwelcome. The rooftop, the heat like a physical weight. Marcus Sullivan, call sign Hawk, settling into position beside her with his rifle. The building shaking as mortars found their range. His voice, steady as always, saying the thing they always said when everything went to hell. The easy days are over, Reaper. Get ready. Sarah's chest tightened. The scar tissue in her left lung, a permanent reminder of that day, seemed to constrict. Breathing became work. She closed her eyes, counted backwards from 10, used the techniques the VA psychologist had taught her before she'd stopped going to the sessions, before she'd stopped pretending therapy could fix what was broken. When she opened her eyes, Master Sergeant Victor Brennan was watching her from across the armory. He was old. Not old like her father had been old, worn down and hollowed out. Old like a tree, gnarled and weathered, but still standing. 68 years on this earth, 50 of them in uniform. The kind of career that spanned generations, from one war to the next, an unbroken line of service that few could claim. His face was a roadmap of hard miles and harder choices, lines carved deep around eyes that had seen too much and remembered all of it. Dutch, everyone called him. She'd never asked why. Some nicknames you earned, some you were given, and none of them required explanation. He didn't approach, didn't speak, just stood there in his perfectly pressed utilities. Master Sergeant stripes crisp on his sleeves, watching her with an expression that was neither judgment nor pity. Something else. Something that made Sarah want to look away, but couldn't. She'd noticed him before, of course. Hard not to notice a man who moved through the base like he owned it. Not with arrogance, but with the quiet authority of someone who'd earned every inch of respect he commanded. He ran the advanced training program, worked directly with Colonel Pierce, and had a reputation for being harder than woodpecker lips, but fair. Fair mattered in a place where fairness was often the only thing standing between a soldier and the meat grinder. Dutch nodded once, a small gesture, almost imperceptible. Then he turned and walked away, his gait steady despite the slight hitch in his left leg. Old wound, probably. Everyone who'd been in long enough carried something. Sarah returned to her work. Another M4, another inspection, another 47 seconds of muscle memory, keeping her mind occupied. The armory began to fill with the morning shift. Specialists and corporals, sergeants and staff sergeants, the machinery of military logistics coming to life. Most ignored her. The maintenance tech, the civilian contractor, the woman who wasn't quite one of them. She'd cultivated that invisibility carefully, wore it like armor. Outside, the training complex was stirring. Fort Bragg in North Carolina, home of the airborne and special operations, where the Army's best came to get better and the merely competent learned they weren't good enough. Sarah had been through here before, a lifetime ago, when she'd been someone else, when she'd worn the trident, when her name had meant something other than failed promise in medical discharge. The first confrontation of the day came at 0730. Colonel David Garrett walked into the armory like a man on a mission, and in his wake came trouble. Sarah knew the type immediately, not because he was cruel or stupid, but because he believed. Believed in the rightness of his position, the clarity of his worldview, the absolute certainty that came from having served in combat and survived. He wore his uniform like a second skin, every crease perfect, boots mirror bright. His chest carried the weight of a career, Bronze Star, Army Commendation Medal with Valor Device, Combat Infantryman Badge. 54 years old and still hard as a coffin nail, with eyes that missed nothing. Behind him came his entourage, Captain Lisa Brennan, the admin NCO who ran personnel with an iron fist and a smile that never reached her eyes. Sergeant Jake Morrison, the armorer who'd been doing this job for 6 years and resented anyone who questioned his expertise. And bringing up the rear, Private Jackson Webb, 22 years old and so eager to please his superiors that he'd forgotten to develop a personality of his own. Sarah knew she was the target before Garrett even looked at her. Some instinct honed over 9 combat deployments told her when violence was coming, even when it came wrapped in regulations and rank. Colonel Garrett stopped in front of her workstation. Sarah set down the rifle she'd been inspecting and came to attention. Not quite military sharp, she wasn't active duty anymore, but respectful, professional, invisible. Your name? His voice was flat, official. Sarah met his eyes, another thing the SEALs had taught her. Never look away first. Never show fear. Fear was blood in the water. Sarah Kincaid, sir, maintenance technician. Garrett's eyes flicked to the weapon on her bench, then back to her face. He was looking for something. Sarah could see the gears turning behind those hard eyes, looking for weakness, for deviation, for anything that didn't fit the picture he'd constructed in his mind. That M4 you just inspected, what was your finding? Sarah gestured to the tag she'd attached to the trigger guard. Firing pin shows 0.3 millimeter deviation from center axis. Within spec for training, but I wouldn't certify it for deployment. Under sustained fire, likely to fracture within 200 rounds. Sergeant Morrison stepped forward, his face flushing red. That's absurd. I inspected that weapon myself yesterday. It's perfectly functional. Sarah said nothing. She'd learned that silence was often the best defense. Let them talk themselves into corners while you stayed calm, professional, invisible. Garrett picked up the rifle, worked the action, peered down the barrel with the practiced eye of a man who'd carried such weapons through actual war. He was thorough. She had to give him that. Not just going through the motions. After a full minute, he set the weapon down and looked at Morrison. Pull the firing pin. Let's see what we have. Morrison's flush deepened, but he obeyed. It took him almost 3 minutes to disassemble the bolt carrier group, his fingers fumbling slightly. When he finally extracted the firing pin and held it up to the light, even Sarah could see the wear pattern from across the bench. Asymmetric, exactly as she'd described. The silence stretched. Garrett examined the pin, then handed it back to Morrison without comment. His expression was unreadable. Replace it. Then bring me your inspection logs for the last month. Morrison nodded, his jaw tight. Yes, sir. Garrett turned back to Sarah. His eyes were different now. Still hard, still assessing, but with a new quality. Curiosity. Where did you learn to spot that kind of wear? Practice, sir. Lots of practice. It wasn't quite a lie. Just the truth with all the important parts removed. Garrett held her gaze for another long moment, and Sarah had the distinct impression she was being filed away in his memory. Categorized, marked for future attention. The colonel turned to leave, then paused. One more thing, Miss Kincaid. That level of expertise is unusual for a maintenance technician. I'll be reviewing your personnel file. Of course, sir. After they left, Sarah's hands started shaking again. She gripped the edge of the workbench until her knuckles went white, breathing through her nose, counting backwards from 10. 9, 8, 7. The scar tissue in her lung ached. 6, 5, 4. The rooftop again, the building collapsing, hawk falling. 3, 2, 1. When she opened her eyes, Dutch was there again. Closer this time. Close enough that she could see the network of scars on his weathered hands, the way his left eye had a slight droop from some old injury. Close enough that when he spoke, his voice carried only to her. You handled that well. It wasn't a question. Sarah nodded, not trusting her voice. Garrett's a good man. Dutch's voice was low, conversational. Doesn't always see it himself, but he is. Desert Storm veteran. Lost most of his unit to friendly fire. 91. Apache gunships got confused in the dark. 23 men gone in under a minute. Sarah felt something twist in her chest. She knew about friendly fire. Knew how it stayed with you, how it carved out pieces of your soul and left cavities that never healed. He thinks he's protecting the institution. Dutch continued. Thinks by following every rule, by maintaining standards, he can prevent another mistake, another loss. That kind of certainty can make a man rigid, can make him see enemies where there's only different. Why are you telling me this? Dutch was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice carried a weight that made Sarah look up. Because I know who you are, Senior Chief Kincaid, and I know what you're running from. The world seemed to tilt. Sarah's hand went instinctively to her left shoulder, where the trident tattoo sat hidden under her work shirt. The eagle, the anchor, the pistol, the symbol that had defined her for 11 years of service. I don't know what you mean. Dutch's smile was sad. Don't insult me, and I won't insult you. I've worked with special operations across 4 decades. Iraq, Afghanistan, Kosovo. Missions that required working alongside the best operators this country produces. I know what that walk looks like. The way you cleared the corners coming into the armory this morning. The way your eyes track every person who enters your space. The way you stand with your weight distributed, ready to move in any direction. That's not maintenance training. Sarah's jaw clenched. If you know, then you know I'm out. Medical discharge. I'm not active duty. I know, Dutch's voice gentled. I also know Colonel Pierce brought you here for a reason. The Guardian program isn't just about fixing weapons, Sarah. It's about fixing warriors. About finding the ones who still have something to give, even when they think they're empty. What do you want from me? I want you to stop drinking. Dutch's words were quiet, but they hit like hammer blows. I want you to remember that being broken doesn't mean being finished. And I want you to be ready, because ready or not, your past is about to catch up with you. He walked away before Sarah could respond, left her standing in the armory with her hands shaking and her mind racing and the taste of shame bitter in her mouth. Because he was right, about the drinking, about the running, about all of it. The flask in her locker seemed to call to her, but she didn't open it, not yet. The day ground on with the relentless rhythm of military routine, weapons inspected, serial numbers logged, maintenance requests filed. Sarah moved through it all with mechanical precision, her body performing tasks while her mind circled Dutch's words like a dog worrying a bone. The Guardian program. She'd heard whispers about it, a classified initiative, something to do with veteran reintegration, but the details were locked behind clearances she no longer held. Pierce had recruited her personally 4 years ago when she'd been fresh out of the hospital, her lungs still healing and her career in ashes. He'd offered her a job, a purpose, a place to disappear. She'd taken it without asking questions because questions required caring about the answers, and she'd been all out of caring. At 1300 hours, the training yard erupted in activity. A new rotation of candidates arriving for assessment, young men and women who wanted to join the ranks of America's elite warriors. Sarah watched them from the armory window, their faces bright with determination and innocence. None of them knew yet what it cost, what it took, what it would take from them. One face stood out, a young private, 19 maybe 20, with the kind of lean build that suggested farm boy origins. He moved with unconscious grace, athletic without trying. When he raised his rifle for the initial qualification shoot, his stance was textbook perfect. Natural. Sarah checked her clipboard. Private Cole Brennan, top marks in basic exceptional scores in marksmanship and land navigation. Recommended for Ranger assessment. Brennan. The name tugged at something in her memory, but she couldn't place it. Lots of soldiers named Brennan, common enough name. Still, something about the way the kid moved reminded her of someone. The economy of motion, the quiet confidence. It was there and gone, a flash of recognition that slipped away before she could grasp it. The afternoon brought another confrontation. Sergeant Morrison appeared at her station, his face still carrying the flush of humiliation from the morning. Behind him, Captain Brennan watched with ill-disguised satisfaction. Sarah recognized the setup immediately. Morrison wanted to save face, and Captain Brennan wanted to see the uppity maintenance tech put in her place. The sergeant slapped a disassembled rifle onto her workbench with enough force to rattle tools. "You think you're so smart. Let's see you put that together." Sarah looked at the components. Standard M4, nothing special. Field strip, not detailed. She could do it in her sleep. Had done it in worse conditions. Under fire with blood in her eyes and her lung collapsing. "How fast?" Her voice was neutral. Morrison sneered. "I can do it in 45 seconds. Let's see if you can manage under a minute." A crowd was gathering. Sarah could feel the weight of attention, the pressure of eyes that wanted to see her fail. Wanted confirmation that she didn't belong, that she was just a pretender, playing at a job real soldiers should have. She thought about refusing, thought about staying invisible, about not giving them the satisfaction. But something in her, some stubborn core that the war hadn't quite managed to kill, refused to back down. "Fine." Morrison's grin widened. He thought he'd won, thought he'd trapped her into public humiliation. Captain Brennan stepped forward with a stopwatch, her smile sharp as a knife. "On my mark, 3, 2, 1, go." Sarah's hands moved. Lower receiver, magazine well clear, buffer spring and buffer tube, trigger assembly seated, upper receiver aligned, takedown pin secured, bolt carrier group inserted, charging handle locked, forward assist engaged, chamber check, function test, done. She looked up. The crowd had gone silent. Morrison's smile had frozen on his face. Captain Brennan stared at the stopwatch like it had betrayed her. "Time." Sarah's voice was steady. 12 seconds. The whisper ran through the crowd like wildfire. 12 seconds, 12 seconds, 12 seconds. Morrison had gone pale. Sarah kept her expression neutral, professional, but inside something sang. Just for a moment, just long enough to remember what it felt like to be good at something, to be exceptional. "That's impossible." Morrison's voice cracked. "Nobody can assemble a rifle that fast. Not without looking." Sarah shrugged. "Practice, lots of practice." Dutch appeared at the edge of the crowd. Their eyes met across the distance, and Sarah saw approval there, but also warning. She just painted a target on her back bigger than anything Morrison could have managed. Colonel Garrett pushed through the crowd, his face unreadable. He picked up the rifle, conducted his own function check, worked the action, pulled the trigger on an empty chamber. Everything perfect. "Where did you train, Miss Kincaid?" Sarah met his eyes and lied through her teeth. "My father was Army, taught me young." Garrett didn't believe her. She could see it in his face, but he nodded, set down the rifle, and turned to address the crowd. "Show's over. Everyone back to your stations." The dispersal was reluctant, soldiers drifting away in 2s and 3s, already spreading the story. The maintenance tech who could assemble a rifle faster than anyone they'd ever seen. By evening, it would be all over the base. By tomorrow, Sarah's anonymity would be shot to hell. As the last stragglers left, Garrett turned back to Sarah. His voice was low, meant only for her. "I'm going to find out who you really are." It wasn't a threat, just a statement of fact. Sarah nodded, knowing protest would only make things worse. "Yes, sir." After he left, Sarah's hands started shaking again. Harder this time. The adrenaline crash, the delayed reaction to stress, the body's way of processing what the mind refused to acknowledge. She made it to the bathroom before the panic attack hit. 15 minutes later, gasping and sweating and hollow, she returned to find Dutch waiting at her station. He held out a bottle of water without comment. Sarah took it, drank, tried to steady her breathing. That was stupid. Dutch's voice held no judgment. Showing off like that. Now Garrett won't stop until he knows everything. "I know. Do you? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you want to be found. Like you're tired of hiding." Sarah had no answer for that. Maybe because it was true. Dutch pulled out a folded piece of paper, set it on her workbench. A medical report. His medical report. The words jumped out at her like assault rifle fire. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer, metastatic, prognosis 6 months, possibly less. Sarah looked up at him, something cold settling in her chest. Dutch met her eyes without flinching. "I'm dying. 6 months if I'm lucky, 3 if I'm not. The Guardian program was my idea, my last mission. Find veterans who still have something to give, train them to train others, Build a legacy that outlasts the flesh. Why are you telling me this? Because you're the one I chose. Pierce agreed, but it was my recommendation. I've been watching you for 4 years, Sarah. Watching you drink yourself to death slowly. Watching you hide from what you are. Watching you waste skills that could save lives. I can't. The words came out broken. I'm not that person anymore. Yes, you are. Dutch's voice was steel wrapped in velvet. You just forgot for a while. But it's still there. I see it every time you inspect a weapon. Every time you move through a room. Every time someone like Morrison tries to embarrass you and you show them what real competence looks like. Sarah shook her head, tears burning behind her eyes. You don't understand. Raqqa. What happened? I left him there. I left Hawk. Dutch's expression softened. I know. I read the after-action report, the classified one. You held position for 11 hours with a bullet through your lung. Saved 14 lives. Hawk made his choice. He bought you time, and you used it. That's not abandonment. That's combat. He died because of me. He died because the enemy killed him. Dutch's voice hardened. Don't take that from him. Don't make his sacrifice about your guilt. He was a warrior. He knew the cost. Honor that. Sarah wiped her eyes angrily. What do you want from me? I want you to be ready. Dutch straightened, and despite his age, despite the cancer eating him from the inside, he stood like the soldier he'd always been. Because in 72 hours, something is going to happen. Something that will require you to make a choice. Be the ghost who hides, or be the guardian who stands. What's going to happen? Dutch smiled, sad and knowing. The past catches up with all of us eventually, Senior Chief. The only question is whether we run or whether we face it. He walked away, leaving Sarah with more questions than answers in a future that suddenly felt a lot less certain. That evening, as the base settled into its nightly rhythm, Sarah stood in the parking lot next to her ancient pickup truck and stared at her phone. The screen showed a contact she hadn't called in 2 years. Emma, her daughter, 12 years old now, living with her father, Sarah's ex-husband David, in Virginia. The divorce had been finalized 3 years ago. David had been patient, had tried to understand, had given her space to heal. But there was only so much space a marriage could hold before it collapsed under the weight of absence. He'd remarried last year, a teacher, someone stable, someone who could be present for Emma in ways Sarah never could. She wondered if Emma hated her. Wondered if at 12 years old you could understand why your mother chose to disappear rather than face the broken pieces of who she used to be. Probably not. Probably Emma just knew her mother didn't call, didn't visit, didn't exist in any meaningful way beyond the monthly support checks that arrived with mechanical regularity. Sarah almost dialed, almost pressed the call button, but the fear stopped her, the fear of hearing hate in her daughter's voice. Or worse, hearing nothing, hearing the polite distance of a child who'd learned not to expect anything from a parent who'd abandoned her. She put the phone away and drove home to the small apartment she'd rented in a complex full of other people who wanted to be left alone. She didn't stop at the liquor store. That felt like a victory, even though she knew the flask in her kitchen cupboard was still half full. The apartment was exactly as she'd left it that morning. Spartan, clean, empty of personality. No photographs on the walls, no mementos of a life lived. Just the necessary furniture and equipment to exist. A way station, not a home. Sarah made dinner. Chicken breast, rice, vegetables. The meal plan the VA nutritionist had given her, designed to build muscle mass and repair the damage years of alcohol and depression had inflicted. She ate mechanically, tasting nothing, fueling the machine. After dinner, she did push-ups, 5 sets of 20, then sit-ups, same count, then lunges, squats, planks. The workout routine she'd maintained even at her lowest, the one thread of discipline that connected her to the warrior she'd been. Her body remembered even when her mind wanted to forget. In the shower, she let the hot water pound against the scar tissue in her chest. The puckered reminder where the 7.62 round had entered, missing her heart by 3 inches. The surgeons had called it a miracle. Sarah called it a curse. Sometimes it would have been easier to have died on that rooftop. Cleaner. Final. But she hadn't died. She'd lived, and living required figuring out what to do with all the days that stretched ahead like an empty road. She dried off, dressed in sweatpants and a tank top, and was pouring a glass of water when someone knocked on her door. Sarah froze. Nobody knew where she lived. Nobody except Pierce and Dutch, and neither of them would show up unannounced. She moved to the door silently, checked the peephole, and felt her heart skip. A woman stood in the hallway, mid-40s, Hispanic features, wearing civilian clothes but standing like military. Supply officer, if Sarah had to guess. The posture was unmistakable. Sarah opened the door but kept the chain on. "Can I help you?" The woman smiled. It was a good smile, warm and genuine. "Sarah Kincaid, my name is Rachel Vega. I'm a supply officer on base. I know this is unexpected, but I was wondering if we could talk." "About what?" "About recognizing ghosts." Rachel's smile turned sad. "I'm a widow. SEAL Team 7. My husband died in Afghanistan in 2011. I know what that particular brand of survivor guilt looks like. I've seen it in my mirror every morning for 13 years. Sarah's hand tightened on the doorframe. "I don't know what you're talking about." Rachel nodded like she'd expected that. "That's okay. You don't have to talk, but I'm here if you change your mind. There's a coffee shop on base. Good coffee, quiet. I'm there most mornings at 0600 before my shift. If you want company, I'll be there. If you don't show up, I'll understand." She turned to leave, then paused. "One more thing. Whatever you're running from, whatever happened, you survived it. That means something. Don't waste it." Rachel walked away, leaving Sarah standing in the doorway with her chest tight and her eyes burning, and something that might have been hope stirring in the rubble of her heart. She closed the door, locked it, stood in the silence of her empty apartment, and tried to decide if hope was a gift or a cruelty. The flask in the kitchen cupboard seemed to whisper her name, but Sarah didn't open it. Not tonight, not while Dutch's words still echoed in her mind, not while Rachel Vega's offer hung in the air like a lifeline thrown to a drowning woman. Instead, she went to the closet and pulled out the old footlocker she kept in the back. Inside, buried under civilian clothes and old bills, was the one thing she'd kept from her time in the teams. Her Glock 19, modified, worn, carried through 9 deployments. She'd smuggled it home when they'd medically discharged her, unable to let go of this one piece of who she'd been. Sarah Fields stripped it, cleaned it, reassembled it, the ritual calming, meditative, her hands steady for the first time all day. When she was done, she sat on her couch with the pistol on the coffee table in front of her and the weight of 4 years pressing down like atmosphere. Dutch was right. She was tired of hiding, tired of being invisible, tired of running from a past that followed her like a shadow no matter how fast or far she ran. The question was whether she had the courage to stop. Outside her window, Fort Bragg settled into darkness. In the distance, she could hear the faint sound of artillery practice from the training ranges, the eternal percussion of war preparation, the drumbeat that had defined her adult life. Sarah closed her eyes and let the sound wash over her. Let it take her back to another time, another place. Back to the rooftop in Raqqa where everything had ended and somehow, against all odds, she'd survived. Hawk's voice in her memory, steady as always. "The easy days are over, Reaper. Get ready." She'd been getting ready for 4 years, preparing for something without knowing what, building strength in secret, maintaining skills in shadow, keeping herself sharp for a mission that didn't exist. Maybe Dutch was right. Maybe the past was about to catch up. Maybe in 72 hours her world would change again, and this time she'd have to decide who she was going to be, the ghost who hid or the guardian who stood. Sarah opened her eyes. The Glock sat on the coffee table, black and deadly and familiar. A tool for killing, but also a tool for protecting. It all depended on who held it and why. She picked it up, felt the weight, the balance, the way it fit her hand like it had been made specifically for her grip. Muscle memory older than thought took over. She racked the slide, checked the chamber, conducted a function test. Perfect. Even after 4 years, still perfect. Sarah set the gun down and went to bed. She didn't pray. Hadn't prayed since Raqqa, since the day she'd learned that God either didn't exist or didn't care about men dying in the dirt. But she hoped. Hoped that when the moment came, when the past finally cornered her with no more room to run, she'd find something in herself worth saving. Some core of the warrior she'd been. Some ember still burning in the ashes. The night passed slowly. Sarah drifted in and out of sleep, troubled by dreams she couldn't quite remember upon waking. When her alarm went off at 0500, she woke feeling unrested but determined. She dressed in her work clothes, made coffee, stared at the empty apartment, and made a decision. At 0550, she walked into the coffee shop on base. Rachel Vega sat in the corner booth reading a paperback novel. When she saw Sarah, her face lit up with a smile that transformed her from attractive to beautiful. Sarah bought 2 coffees and walked to the booth. She set 1 cup in front of Rachel and slid into the seat across from her. Neither of them spoke for a long moment, just sat there, 2 women who'd lost pieces of themselves to war, drinking coffee as the sun came up over Fort Bragg. Finally, Rachel broke the silence. "Thank you for coming." Sarah nodded. She didn't trust her voice yet, didn't trust that she wouldn't start crying if she tried to speak. Rachel seemed to understand. She went back to her book, letting Sarah exist in the space without pressure or expectation. They sat like that for 20 minutes. Then Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from Dutch. Just 3 words. "It's starting. Come." Sarah stood. Rachel looked up, concerned. "You okay?" "No." Sarah's voice was rough, "but I'm going to be." She walked out into the morning light, toward the armory and whatever was waiting there. Behind her, Rachel called out, "I'm here. Whenever you're ready to talk." Sarah raised a hand in acknowledgement without turning around. She'd taken the first step, accepted the lifeline. That was enough for now. The walk to the armory felt longer than usual, every step carrying weight. Sarah could feel something building, some pressure in the air that reminded her of the moments before combat. That electric tension when everyone knows violence is coming but hasn't started yet. The armory was crowded when she arrived. More people than usual, focused on something at the center of the room. Sarah pushed through the crowd and felt her stomach drop. Colonel Garrett stood next to her workstation, holding a folder. His face was grim. Beside him, Dutch watched with an expression Sarah couldn't read. "Miss Kincaid," Garrett's voice carried across the sudden silence. "We need to talk, in Colonel Pierce's office, now." Sarah's hands didn't shake, not this time. She looked at Dutch, who gave the smallest nod. Permission, or maybe encouragement. "Yes, sir." As she followed Garrett toward the door, Sarah caught sight of young Cole Brennan at the edge of the crowd. The kid looked confused, curious. Something about his eyes reminded her again of someone, but she still couldn't place it. Then they were outside, walking across the compound in the morning light, and Sarah's mind was racing through possibilities. Garrett had found something, had to have. The question was what, and how much, and what it would cost her. Colonel Pierce's office was in the headquarters building, a squat concrete structure that had been there since before Sarah was born. She'd been inside exactly once, 4 years ago, when Pierce had offered her the maintenance job. The colonel had been kind then, almost fatherly. She wondered if he'd be kind today. Garrett opened the door without knocking. Pierce looked up from his desk, his weathered face unreadable. 64 years old, a career that spanned decades of classified operations, carrying secrets that would never see daylight. Senior Chief Kincaid. Pierce's use of her old rank was deliberate. "Please sit." Sarah sat. Garrett remained standing. Dutch entered last, closing the door behind them with a soft click that sounded like the ceiling of a tomb. Pierce opened a folder on his desk. Sarah recognized it immediately. Her personnel file. The classified one. The one that should have been locked behind clearances Garrett couldn't access. "Colonel Garrett has been persistent in his inquiries about your background." Pierce's tone was neutral. He contacted an old friend at JSOC. That friend, quite properly, denied the request and reported it to me. However, the inquiry itself triggered certain protocols. Sarah said nothing. Let them talk. Let them tell her what they already knew. Garrett stepped forward, his face tight. "I was trying to protect this base, protect the integrity of our training program. I thought you were a fraud, someone pretending to be more than they were." He paused, and something that might have been respect flickered in his hard eyes. "I was wrong. You're not pretending to be more. You're pretending to be less." Pierce closed the folder. Sarah Kincaid, call sign Reaper, SEAL Team 6, 9 combat deployments, 52 confirmed operations. Bronze Star with Valor, 3 Purple Hearts. Operation Iron Serpent, Raqqa, Syria, March 2021. 11-hour defensive position with catastrophic injury. 19 enemy combatants eliminated. 14 friendly forces extracted. The room was silent. Outside, Fort Bragg continued its daily routine, oblivious to the small drama unfolding in this office. Medical discharge, October 2021. Pierce continued. PTSD, alcohol abuse, physical injury, declined VA treatment after initial intake. Divorced, estranged from minor daughter. Employed as civilian contractor in maintenance capacity under the Guardian program. He looked up at Sarah. "Do I have that right, Senior Chief?" "Yes, sir." Garrett's jaw worked. His voice when he spoke was rough. "I owe you an apology. I thought you were undermining our standards. I was blind. Sarah met his eyes. You weren't wrong to question, sir. I am undermining standards, just not the way you thought. What does that mean? It means I'm broken. Sarah's voice was steady. It means I drink to forget what I've done and who I've lost. It means I haven't spoken to my daughter in 2 years because I don't know how to be a mother when I can barely be a person. It means that every day I wake up wondering why I survived when better people died. Standards require being whole. I'm not whole. The silence stretched. Then Dutch spoke for the first time since entering the office. That's where you're wrong. Sarah turned to him. Dutch stepped forward, his old face fierce. You're not broken. You're wounded. There's a difference. Broken can't be fixed. Wounded just needs time and proper care. The Guardian program isn't about pretending wounds don't exist. It's about teaching warriors how to carry them. Pierce nodded. Colonel Garrett, what I'm about to tell you is classified, but given the circumstances, you've earned the right to know. He opened another folder, this one thicker, stamped with classification markings. 3 days ago, we received intelligence, confirmed, verified, solid. Lieutenant Commander Marcus Sullivan, callsign Hawk, is alive. The world stopped. Sarah's heart seized in her chest. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't process what she'd just heard. Hawk, alive. After 4 years of guilt, of grief, of carrying his death like stones in her pockets. Prisoner of war, Pierce continued, held by militia forces on the Syria-Iraq border. Condition unknown, but he's alive. We have 72 hours before he's transferred to a location we can't reach. A rescue operation is being mounted. Small team, low profile, maximum deniability. Pierce's eyes found Sarah's. We want you on that team, Senior Chief. We need you on that team. Hawk specifically asked for you. He got a message out 6 months ago through an asset. 3 words. Tell her, that's all, tell her. Sarah's vision blurred. Tears she'd been holding back for 4 years finally breaking through. Hawk was alive, had been alive, had endured 4 years of captivity believing she'd come for him. And she'd been here, hiding, drinking, wasting herself. The easy days are over. Their words, their code. The thing they said when everything went wrong. Hawk had said it that day on the rooftop right before the building collapsed, before she'd watched him fall, before everything ended. Sarah wiped her eyes, straightened her shoulders. When she spoke, her voice was the voice of the warrior she'd been, clear, strong, certain. When do we leave? Pierce allowed himself a small smile. 72 hours. Wheels up at 1800. Master Sergeant Brennan will be going with you. Dutch nodded. My son needs to come home. And I need to look him in the eye one last time before this cancer finishes what 4 decades of service started. Sarah's head snapped around. Your son. Dutch's smile was sad. Marcus Sullivan took his mother's name when we divorced. I wasn't Father of the Year. Chose the Corps over family more times than I can count. He joined the SEALs to understand me, and I was too proud to tell him I was proud of him. Now I get one chance to fix that. Maybe the only chance. The pieces clicked into place. Cole Brennan, the way he moved, the natural talent. Sarah looked at Dutch. Cole, my grandson. Dutch's voice broke slightly. Marcus's boy doesn't know his father's alive, doesn't know I exist. We kept it that way to protect him. But after this, after we bring Marcus home, maybe that can change. Garrett cleared his throat. Colonel Pierce, if there's room on this operation for one more. Pierce raised an eyebrow. You want to go? I spent 25 years hating someone for a mistake that wasn't her fault. Garrett's voice was rough. For a tragedy that was just war being war. Maybe I can spend what's left of my career doing something that matters, making amends. Pierce considered, then nodded. I'll make the arrangements. The 4 of you, plus 2 operators from DevGru, 6 total, tight, professional, capable. He stood, and they all came to attention. Dismissed. Use the next 72 hours to prepare. Physical and mental. Get your affairs in order. This is a black operation. If something goes wrong, there's no cavalry coming, no extraction, no acknowledgement. You'll simply cease to exist. Sarah understood, had known missions like this before, the kind that didn't make it into official records, the kind that required being willing to die in the dark with no recognition, no memorial, no acknowledgement that you'd ever been there. She'd made that choice 9 times before. She could make it again. For Hawk. As they filed out of the office, Dutch caught her arm. His grip was weak, the cancer already stealing his strength, but his eyes were fierce. 72 hours. Use them well. Make peace with your daughter if you can. Make peace with yourself if you can. But be ready, because this time we're bringing everyone home. No one left behind. Sarah nodded. The Guardian's creed, the promise that defined who they were. No one left behind. 72 hours sounds like a long time until you realize it's all the time you have left. Sarah spent the first 6 hours of that countdown sitting in her truck in the parking lot of an elementary school in Virginia, 3 hours north of Fort Bragg, the place where her daughter went to 5th grade, where Emma Kincaid walked through those doors every morning at 7:45 and emerged every afternoon at 3:15, backpack slung over one shoulder, usually talking to a friend Sarah had never met. She'd driven up after the meeting in Pierce's office, hadn't planned it, hadn't thought it through, just got in her truck and drove north like something was pulling her. Some instinct that said if she was going to fly into Syria and maybe not come back, she needed to see her daughter's face one more time, even if Emma didn't see hers. The school was one of those modern brick buildings that tried to look welcoming with bright colors and playground equipment that met all the latest safety standards. Not like the schools Sarah had attended as a kid. Those had been concrete blocks that looked like prisons, because the architects had probably designed prisons and saw no reason to change the blueprint for children. At 3:15 exactly, the doors opened and kids poured out like water from a broken dam. Sarah watched them all, looking for the one face that mattered. It took almost 5 minutes before she spotted Emma. 12 years old now. God, 12. When had that happened? The last time Sarah had seen her in person, Emma had been 10 and still willing to hug her mother goodbye. Still willing to pretend that everything was okay, that mommy was just going through a hard time and would get better soon. 2 years changed people, changed children especially. Emma was taller now, her dark hair longer, pulled back in a ponytail that swung when she walked. She wore jeans and a purple hoodie and carried her backpack like it weighed nothing. Growing up strong, growing up without her mother. A woman waited by the curb. Not David, Sarah's ex-husband, someone else. Younger, pretty, with blonde hair and a patient smile. The new wife, Jennifer, a teacher at the middle school. Everything Sarah wasn't. Stable, present, normal. Emma ran to her, not to her father's new wife, Sarah realized. Just ran to the car where Jennifer waited. Casual, comfortable. The routine of a child who knew she was going home to people who would be there. Who wouldn't disappear for months at a time. Who wouldn't show up drunk and crying at 2 in the morning, trying to explain things that couldn't be explained. Sarah watched Emma get in the car. Watched Jennifer check her seatbelt like it was the most natural thing in the world. Watched them drive away, heading to a home that Sarah had never seen. A life she wasn't part of. A future she'd forfeited when she'd chosen to drown in a bottle rather than face her own daughter. She sat in the truck for another hour after they left. Just sat there in the emptying parking lot, teachers heading home, custodians arriving to clean. Sat there and tried to figure out what she'd been hoping to accomplish. Absolution, maybe. Or just one more look at the face that haunted her dreams more than any enemy ever had. Her phone buzzed. A text from Rachel Vega. Just checking in. Coffee tomorrow morning. Sarah stared at the message for a long time before responding. Can't. Something came up. Rain check. The 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Rachel was thinking, finally, be safe, whatever it is. Sarah put the phone away and started the truck. The drive back to Fort Bragg took 3 hours. She didn't stop, didn't eat, just drove through the gathering darkness with her mind cycling through everything that needed to happen in the next 66 hours. By the time she reached her apartment, it was past midnight. She had a mission brief at 0600, 5 hours to sleep if she was lucky. She'd operated on less. Inside, the apartment felt more empty than usual. Sarah stood in the doorway and looked at the space she'd been living in for 4 years. The generic furniture, the blank walls, the complete absence of anything that marked this place as belonging to a specific human being. She could disappear tomorrow, and the only way anyone would know she'd ever been here was the name on the lease. The flask sat in the kitchen cupboard where she'd left it, still half full, still calling. Sarah took it out, unscrewed the cap, and poured the contents down the sink. The whiskey swirled away, amber becoming clear, becoming nothing. She threw the flask in the trash. If she was going to do this, going to become Reaper again even for a few days, she needed to do it clean. needed to prove to herself that she could still be the warrior without the crutch, that somewhere under the scar tissue and self-hatred, the person she'd been was still alive. Sarah set her alarm for 0500 and lay down on the bed without undressing. Sleep came in fragments. Dreams of Raqqa, of Hawk falling, of Emma's face as she climbed into someone else's car. Dreams that jerked her awake gasping, heart hammering, the scar tissue in her lung burning. At 0430, she gave up and got in the shower. Let the hot water pound against her shoulders while she ran through the mental checklist. Weapons check, equipment check, medical kit, emergency rations, communications gear, the ritual of preparation, familiar as breathing. She was out the door by 0515, coffee in a travel mug, wearing utilities that still fit despite 4 years of maintenance work keeping her in shape. The drive to base was quiet, too early for morning traffic, just her and the long-haul truckers and the people who worked night shifts coming home to sleep. Fort Bragg was already awake. The base never really slept, just moved through cycles of activity like a living organism. Sarah badged through the gate, drove to the operations building where the brief was scheduled. Dutch's truck was already in the parking lot. So was Garrett's. Both men had beaten her here. The briefing room was secure, windowless, with maps on the walls and classified markings on everything. Dutch sat at the table looking older than he had yesterday, his face gray with pain he was trying to hide. Garrett stood studying a satellite photograph, his posture military perfect despite the early hour. They both looked up when Sarah entered. Dutch nodded. Garrett's expression was harder to read. Not hostile anymore, but not quite friendly either. They were colleagues now, bound by mission and necessity. Trust would have to be earned. Pierce arrived at 0600 exactly, followed by 2 men Sarah didn't recognize. Both were younger than her, maybe early 30s, with the quiet confidence of operators who'd proven themselves. One was tall and lean with a Scottish accent when he introduced himself as Ghost. The other was shorter, compact, Irish, call sign Wraith. Former DevGru, both of them, Pierce said. Best of the best. They looked at Sarah with professional interest, assessing, not challenging. She'd proven herself to people like this before, would have to prove herself again. Pierce cleared his throat. Before we begin tactical planning, there's someone you need to meet. She's been coordinating the intelligence that made this operation possible. A woman entered from the side door. Late 40s, sharp eyes, carrying herself with the confident authority of someone who'd spent decades in dangerous places. She wore civilian clothes but moved like military, and something about her presence commanded immediate attention. This is Catherine Reed, Pierce gestured to her, CIA Special Activities Division. She's been running assets in Syria for the past 6 years. One of those assets gave us the intel on Hawk's location. Catherine stepped forward, shook hands with each operator. When she reached Sarah, her grip was firm, her eyes knowing. Senior Chief Kincaid, I've heard a great deal about you. Operation Iron Serpent in particular. Sarah nodded, uncertain where this was going. Catherine seemed to read her confusion. The asset who confirmed Hawk's location was one of mine, Yasmin al-Rashid. She'd been in place for 3 years, working as a nurse in the local hospital. Treated militia fighters, gathered intelligence, saved lives. Catherine's voice tightened slightly. 6 months ago, Yasmin managed to get brief access to the compound where they're holding Hawk. Saw him, confirmed identity, got his message out. Tell her. Those were his exact words. Yasmin understood it was important, that it meant something. She died 2 weeks later. Car bomb in Damascus. Sarah felt something cold settle in her chest. Someone sacrificed their life for this. Yasmin had 2 children. Catherine's voice was steady, but Sarah heard the emotion underneath. 8 and 6 years old. They're with her sister now in Turkey. Orphaned because their mother believed getting Hawk home mattered. Why are you telling me this? Because I want you to understand what this mission has already cost. Catherine met her eyes. Because I don't want you going in there thinking this is just about one man. It's about honoring the sacrifice of a woman who died believing American prisoners deserve to come home. Don't waste that, though. I won't. Catherine nodded, satisfied. You'll have real-time intelligence support from my team. We have a satellite window during your infiltration. Communications relay through secure frequency. If things go wrong, we'll do everything possible to extract you. She paused. But Senior Chief, understand that everything might not be enough. This is deep in hostile territory. Russian advisors are present in the area. If you're compromised, if this becomes an international incident, Washington will disavow the operation. You'll be on your own. Understood. The briefing lasted 2 hours. Maps, satellite imagery, guard rotations, contingency plans. The compound was on the Syria-Iraq border, in territory controlled by a militia group with ties to both ISIS remnants and Iranian advisors. 30 to 40 fighters, well-armed, professional, the kind of enemy that didn't make mistakes often. Hawk was being held in a second-story room of the main building. Intel from Yasmin, verified through signals intercept in thermal imaging. The window of opportunity was narrow. In 60 hours, Hawk would be transferred to a location in Iran that CIA couldn't penetrate. This was the only chance. Tight timeline, small team, maximum risk. Pierce laid it out without sugarcoating. This is voluntary. No one will think less of anyone who walks away. The risks are substantial, the support minimal. If this goes wrong, you're on your own. No rescue, no acknowledgement, no flag-draped coffin. You'll just disappear and your families will be told you died in a training accident. No one moved. Sarah had expected that. Men like Dutch and Garrett didn't walk away from missions. Men like Ghost and Wraith had spent their careers doing exactly this kind of work. And Sarah herself had no intention of leaving Hawk in that cell for one more day than necessary. "We'll go then." Pierce looked at each of them in turn. "Wheels up at 1800 tomorrow. Use the time between now and then to get your affairs in order. Letters, wills, whatever you need to do. Master Sergeant Brennan, a word." The others filed out. Sarah lingered near the door, not quite eavesdropping, but not quite leaving. She heard Pierce's voice, low and serious. "Victor, you're not fit for this. The cancer is progressing faster than expected. The doctors give you 3 months, maybe 4. This mission could kill you." Dutch's response was steel. "Then I die doing something that matters. That's my son in that cell, Ben. My son, and I wasn't there for him when he needed me. I'll be damned if I let him rot in a Syrian prison while I waste away in a hospital bed." Silence. Then Pierce's voice softer. "Go with God, old friend." Sarah slipped away before they noticed her listening. Outside, the morning sun was burning off the fog that had settled overnight. She found Garrett standing by his vehicle, staring at nothing. "Colonel." He turned. The hostility from yesterday was gone, replaced by something else. Weariness, maybe. Or the weight of too many years carrying too many regrets. "I spent 25 years hating the wrong person," he said without preamble. "There was a woman, Captain Michelle Torres, intelligence officer. She was with my unit in Desert Storm. February 91. We were pushing toward Basra. Apache gunships were supposed to provide overwatch." He stopped, his jaw working. Somehow the coordinates got mixed up. Friendly fire. 23 men dead in under a minute. Torres survived. She was in a Bradley 50 meters away from where the missiles hit. She spent the next 10 years trying to prove it wasn't her fault, that the mistake came from higher up the chain. But people needed someone to blame, so they blamed her. What happened to her? Suicide. 2001, 10th anniversary of the war. She put her service pistol in her mouth and pulled the trigger. Left a note. Just 3 words. "I am sorry." Garrett's voice broke. She was sorry for something she didn't do, for surviving when others died. That's what guilt does. It eats you from the inside until there's nothing left. He looked at Sarah directly. "I saw that same guilt in you yesterday, that same weight. I was going to destroy you for it, because destroying you was easier than facing my own part in destroying Torres. I'm not asking for forgiveness. Just wanted you to know that I understand, and that I won't make the same mistake twice." Sarah nodded. "We're good, Colonel. Let's just bring Hawk home." "That I can do." The rest of the day passed in a blur of preparation. Sarah returned to her apartment, packed a small bag with the essentials she'd need. Not much. Some clothes, toiletries, the Glock 19 she'd kept from her SEAL days. Everything else could stay. If she didn't come back, someone would clean out the apartment and dispose of her possessions, and that would be the end of Sarah Kincaid's presence on Earth. She tried to write a letter to Emma, sat at the kitchen table with pen and paper, trying to find words that would explain the inexplicable. How do you tell your 12-year-old daughter that you're sorry for being absent, sorry for being broken, Sorry for choosing the bottle over her. How do you explain that some wounds don't heal, that some wars don't end when you come home? She wrote 3 versions, threw them all away. Anything she wrote would sound like justification or self-pity. Emma deserved better than that. Deserved a mother who could show up, be present, do the work of parenting. Since Sarah couldn't give her that, the least she could do was not burden her with a letter full of empty apologies. Instead, she wrote 5 words on a clean sheet of paper. I love you. I'm sorry. She put it in an envelope, addressed it to Emma, care of David, and left it on the kitchen table. If she came back, she'd throw it away. If she didn't, someone would find it and mail it. Either way, Emma would know. At 1600 hours, Sarah's phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Hello? The voice on the other end was female, older, professional. Senior Chief Kincaid, Catherine Reed. I wanted to reach out personally before you deploy. Sarah sat down. What can I do for you? I wanted you to understand something about Yasmin. Catherine's voice carried weight. She wasn't just an asset to me. She was a friend. We worked together for 3 years. I recruited her, trained her, sent her into situations that terrified her. And she did it anyway because she believed it mattered. I'm sorry for your loss. Don't be sorry. Catherine's tone sharpened. Be worthy of her sacrifice. Yasmin died getting you the intelligence you need to bring Hawk home. She died believing that American prisoners deserve rescue, that the mission matters more than the cost. Honor that. I will. Good. Catherine paused. One more thing. Yasmin's last message to me the day before she died. She said if the operation succeeded, if Hawk came home, she wanted you to know something. She wanted you to know that some people are worth dying for, that redemption is real, that the past doesn't define the future. Sarah felt tears burning behind her eyes. She didn't even know me. No, but she knew what you represented, the promise that we don't abandon our people, that even after 4 years, even when it seems impossible, we still come for them. Catherine's voice softened. Don't let her death be for nothing, Sarah. Bring him home. After Catherine hung up, Sarah sat staring at her phone. Yasmin al-Rashid, a name she'd never heard before today. A woman who died so that Sarah could have a chance to save Hawk. The weight of that felt immense, crushing. She thought about those 2 children, 8 and 6, growing up without their mother because she'd chosen duty over safety. Would they understand when they were older? Would they forgive her? Or would they just carry the weight of abandonment, wondering why they hadn't been enough to make their mother stay? Sarah knew how that felt. At 1700 hours, she drove to the base one last time as a civilian. Tomorrow she'd be Reaper again. But tonight she was still Sarah Kincaid, maintenance technician, broken veteran, absent mother. One last night to be the person she'd been trying to become. She found Rachel Vega in the parking lot of the supply depot, loading boxes into a truck. Rachel looked up as Sarah approached, her expression brightening before concern took over. I thought you couldn't do coffee. I can't. Sarah's voice was rough. I'm leaving, tomorrow. Can't say where or why. Just wanted to say thank you for reaching out, for offering friendship when I didn't deserve it. Rachel set down the box she'd been holding and came closer. How long will you be gone? Don't know if I'm coming back. The words hung between them. Rachel's face went through several emotions: surprise, fear, understanding. She was a military widow. She knew what those words meant. Then I'm glad you came to say goodbye. Rachel reached out and took Sarah's hand. Whatever you're doing, wherever you're going, come back if you can. There's coffee waiting, and other things if you're interested. Sarah felt something crack in her chest, not breaking, but opening. Some long, sealed place where hope had been locked away finally seeing light. I'd like that. Good. Rachel squeezed her hand, then let go. Be safe, Sarah Kincaid. The world needs more people willing to do hard things. Sarah drove away before the tears could fall, before she could change her mind, could decide that staying was safer than going, that being broken and alive was better than being whole and dead. She spent the evening in her apartment doing the small rituals of preparation. Cleaned the Glock, loaded magazines, checked her gear. Each action, mechanical, familiar, the muscle memory of 1,000 missions carried out across a dozen years. By 2200 hours, everything was ready. Her go bag by the door, her affairs such as they were in order. Nothing left but to wait. Sleep didn't come. Sarah lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind racing through possibilities and probabilities. The approach route, the breach points, the extraction plan, but also the things that could go wrong. The million variables that turned plans into chaos, operations into casualties. She thought about Hawk, tried to imagine what 4 years in captivity had done to him. She'd seen prisoners of war before, both during rescue operations and after they'd been repatriated. Some came home intact, bodies broken, but minds whole. Others came home as shells, their spirits crushed by torture and isolation and the systematic destruction of human dignity. Which would Hawk be? The man she'd known had been steady as stone, unshakable in crisis. But everyone had a breaking point. 4 years was a long time to hold on to hope. At 0400, Sarah gave up on sleep. She showered, dressed in civilian clothes suitable for travel, and made coffee she didn't drink. By 0500, she was on the road to base, watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of red and gold. Sailors called a red sunrise a warning. Red sky at morning, sailor take warning. Blood in the sky, blood on the ground. The operations hangar was a hive of activity when she arrived. The helicopter that would take them to the departure point was being prepped, its rotors secured, fuel tanks topped off. Ghost and Wraith were already there, running through equipment checks with the methodical precision of men who understood that overlooked details killed people. Dutch arrived looking worse than yesterday, his skin gray, his movements careful like everything hurt. He saw Sarah watching and forced a smile. "Don't worry about me, Senior Chief. I've been dying for months. Today's no different." Sarah wasn't reassured. "How much pain are you in?" "Enough, not too much." Dutch's eyes were clear despite the pain. "I've got enough left in me for one more mission. That's all I need." Garrett was the last to arrive, carrying a duffel bag and wearing an expression of grim determination. He nodded to the assembled team, his voice when he spoke carrying the weight of command, even though technically he was just another operator on this mission. "Gentlemen, Senior Chief, let's bring our people home." The next 6 hours were spent in final preparations. Weapons distribution, Ghost's specialty and explosives laid out and explained, Wraith's communications equipment tested and retested. Pierce appeared at noon with final updates from Catherine's intelligence team. The guard rotation held, the timeline was good, the window was open. Catherine herself called at 1400 hours, her voice coming through the secure speaker in the briefing room. Final intelligence update, Russian advisors confirmed in the area. 2 personnel, likely GRU. They're training the militia, not directly guarding prisoners, but their presence complicates things. If you're detected and Russians are involved, Moscow will scream about American aggression. Washington will disavow fast. "So keep it clean," Sarah's voice was flat. "Keep it invisible," Catherine corrected. "Get in, get Hawk, get out. No international incident, no diplomatic crisis, just ghosts in the night." "Understood." "One more thing." Catherine's voice softened. "Yasmin's sister called me this morning. The children wanted me to tell the American soldiers thank you. They don't understand what their mother died for, but they know it was important. They wanted you to know they're proud of her." Sarah felt her chest tighten. "We won't let them down." "I know you won't." "Good hunting, Reaper." At 1600 hours, they boarded a transport plane for the first leg of their journey. The flight would take them to a forward operating base in Jordan, where they'd transfer to the helicopter for the final push into Syria. 8 hours in the air, then the mission would begin in earnest. Sarah found a seat in the cargo area and strapped in. The plane's engines were loud enough to make conversation difficult, which suited her fine. She wasn't in a mood to talk, wasn't ready to make small talk with men she barely knew about a mission that might kill them all. Dutch settled into the seat beside her. For a long time, neither of them spoke, just sat in the vibrating belly of the plane as it climbed to altitude. Finally, Dutch leaned close enough to be heard over the engines. "I need to tell you something. About Marcus, about Hawk." Sarah turned to look at him. Dutch's face was drawn, pain and regret carved deep into the weathered features. "When he was 10, I missed his birthday. I was in Panama, 89. Operation Just Cause. Seemed important at the time. His mother, my wife, she called me that day. Put Marcus on the phone. He asked me when I was coming home. I told him soon. It was a lie. I didn't come home for another 4 months." Dutch's voice cracked. "When I did come home, he didn't ask me about it. Didn't ask why I'd missed his birthday, or the one before that, or his school play, or any of the dozen other things fathers are supposed to be there for. He just looked at me like I was a stranger. Like I was someone who visited sometimes but wasn't really part of his life. His wife divorced him 2 years later, took Marcus, moved to California, remarried. I could have fought it, could have demanded custody or visitation. But I knew the truth. I was a better Marine than I was a father, so I let them go. Told myself it was for the best. What happened then? Marcus grew up, joined the Navy the day he turned 18, made it through BUDS, became a SEAL. His mother called me when he graduated, said he wanted to understand me, wanted to know what was so important that I'd chosen it over him. Did you tell him? Dutch shook his head. Pride, stupidity, fear. I don't know. I told myself he needed to figure it out on his own, that explaining would sound like justification. Truth was, I didn't know how to explain. How do you tell your son that you loved him but loved something else more? That you knew you were failing him but couldn't stop yourself? You're getting a second chance now. Maybe. If we make it. If Marcus can forgive 20 years of absence. Dutch looked at Sarah with eyes that held a lifetime of regret. Don't make my mistakes, Senior Chief. Whatever's broken between you and your daughter, fix it. Don't wait until you're dying to realize how much time you wasted. Sarah nodded, her throat tight. I'll try. That's all any of us can do. The plane droned on through the night. Sarah dozed fitfully, her mind cycling through half-remembered dreams and mission plans. When she woke, the sun was setting outside the small windows, painting the world below in shades of orange and red. They were somewhere over the Mediterranean, heading east toward a war zone that officially didn't exist. The landing in Jordan was smooth. They transferred to a smaller facility, a forward operating base that served as a staging ground for black operations. No insignia, no flags, no acknowledgement of which country operated it. Just hard-faced men and women who asked no questions and expected none in return. The helicopter was waiting. A modified Black Hawk, matte black paint, suppressed rotors, state-of-the-art avionics. The kind of bird that could slip across borders without being detected, that could insert a team and extract them before anyone knew they'd been there. Ghost and Wraith loaded their equipment while Dutch and Garrett conducted final checks. Sarah stood apart, breathing deeply, centering herself. The transformation was happening, whether she was ready or not. Sarah Kincaid, the maintenance tech, was fading away. Reaper, the SEAL operator, was emerging, called forth by necessity and mission and the promise she'd made 4 years ago on a rooftop in Raqqa. No one left behind. Pierce appeared one last time before they boarded. He shook each of their hands, his weathered face grave. Godspeed, bring them home. The helicopter lifted off at 2200 hours local time. They had 6 hours of flight ahead of them, approaching from the south through Iraqi airspace before turning west into Syria. The route was planned to avoid radar installations and population centers, threading the needle between detection and mission abort. Sarah found a seat and strapped in. Across from her, Dutch had his eyes closed, his lips moving in what might have been prayer. Garrett sat with his hands folded, staring at nothing. Ghost and Wraith were checking weapons, the quiet competence of professionals doing what they'd done 100 times before. The landscape below was dark, the occasional light marking a village or small town. Most of the country was sleeping, unaware that a team of American operators was passing overhead on a mission that would never be acknowledged. The secret war that never ended, fought by people whose names would never be known. Sarah felt her heart rate slow, her breathing deepen. The pre-combat calm, the state of focused readiness that came when there was nothing left to do but execute. She'd been here before, in helicopters like this one, heading toward violence and uncertainty. The familiar weight of it settled over her like armor. The helicopter pilot's voice crackled over the intercom. 30 minutes to LZ. Weather is clear, no radar contacts. We're clean. The team stirred, making final preparations. Night vision goggles checked and rechecked. Weapons press checked. Each man touching his gear in the ritual that said ready, ready, ready. Sarah pulled out her Glock, verified the magazine, chambered around. The mechanical action calmed her, gave her hands something to do. She thought about Emma, about Rachel, about all the reasons she had to come back. Then she set those thoughts aside. Mission first. Always mission first. That was the creed, the code, the promise that defined who they were. 15 minutes. The helicopter was flying low now, hugging the terrain, using the landscape to mask its approach. Sarah could see the ground rushing past below, dark shapes that might have been rocks or vehicles or sleeping animals. The desert was alive at night, full of things that moved unseen. 10 minutes. Ghost and Wraith moved to the doors, ready to fast rope if needed. The plan called for a soft landing in a dry riverbed 12 kilometers from the target, but plans changed. Always be ready for the world to shift. 5 minutes. Sarah's hands were steady. No tremor, no shake. The fear was there, but controlled, managed, channeled into focus. She was Reaper again, fully and completely. The woman who had held a rooftop for 11 hours with a bullet in her lung. The warrior who had earned her call sign through blood and fire and the absolute refusal to quit. 1 minute, the helicopter flared, rotors biting air, settling toward the ground. Sarah felt the skids touch, felt the solid earth beneath them. They were on the ground in Syria, in enemy territory, with nothing between them and death but training and luck, and the brotherhood of warriors who refused to leave anyone behind. The door gunner gave the signal. Go. They flowed out of the helicopter in practice sequence. Ghost first, then Wraith, then Garrett, then Sarah. Dutch came last, moving slower than the others, but still moving. They formed a defensive perimeter while the helicopter lifted off, its rotors fading into the distance until there was nothing but silence and starlight. 12 kilometers to target, 4 hours of movement through hostile territory. Then the breach, the rescue, the exfiltration. Or death. Those were the only two outcomes now. Success or failure, measured in heartbeats and bullets and the choices they would make in the moments that mattered. Ghost took point, his night vision goggles painting the world in shades of green. They moved in tactical formation, spacing between each operator. Weapons ready, every sense alert. The desert was quiet but not empty. Sarah could hear the distant bark of tone, the occasional vehicle on a road too far away to see. Life continuing in the dark while they passed through like ghosts. The first hour passed without incident. The second hour brought them to a ridgeline where they could see the compound in the distance. Lights burning in the darkness. Guard towers silhouetted against the stars. Sarah raised her binoculars, scanning the target, counting guards, noting positions, comparing what she saw to the intelligence briefings. Everything matched. The guard rotation, the lighting, the layout. Either their intelligence was perfect or they were walking into a trap. No way to know until they committed. Dutch settled beside her, breathing hard, his face slick with sweat despite the cool night air. Sarah handed him a water bottle. He drank, nodded thanks. 2 more hours and we're at the breach point. Can you make it? Dutch's smile was grim. I'll make it or I'll die trying. Either way, I'm going home with my son. They moved on. The third hour brought them through a wadi, a dried riverbed that provided concealment, but also trapped them in a channel where detection would mean death. Ghost moved with agonizing slowness, checking each step, each shadow, each possible ambush point. Halfway through the wadi, Wraith's hand came up in a fist signal. Stop! Everyone froze. Sarah's finger found the trigger guard of her rifle, ready but not committed, waiting for the threat to reveal itself. Wraith pointed. Ahead, barely visible in the darkness, 2 men with rifles. Militia patrol, probably random, probably routine, but between the team and their objective, and that meant they had to be dealt with. Ghost and Wraith moved forward without being told, 2 shadows in the darkness closing on targets that didn't know they were already dead. Sarah watched through her night vision, saw the silent takedown, the controlled violence that ended 2 lives in the span of seconds. No shots fired, no alarm raised. Professional, efficient, necessary. They moved past the bodies without slowing. The dead were behind them now, part of the cost of mission success. Sarah had learned long ago not to dwell on the faces of the men she killed. They'd made their choices, she'd made hers, and the only thing that mattered was bringing her people home. The 4th hour brought them to the final rally point, 500 meters from the compound. They took cover in a cluster of rocks, checking weapons, synchronizing watches, making final preparations. Ghost assembled his breaching charge while Wraith set up the communications relay. Garrett and Dutch checked firing lanes, identifying positions for overwatch. Sarah studied the compound through her scope. 2nd story northwest corner. That's where Hawk would be if the intelligence was right, if he was still alive, if this whole thing wasn't some elaborate trap designed to kill American operators. Only one way to find out. Ghost looked at his watch, then at the team. 0200 in 15 minutes. Guard change at 0215. We have 90 seconds. 90 seconds to breach the wall, reach the building, get to Hawk, and get out before the alarm was raised. 90 seconds that would determine whether they succeeded or failed, lived or died. Sarah felt her heart rate slow further, entering the zone where time stretched and everything became clear. The pre-combat state where fear transformed into focus, where doubt became certainty. This was what she'd been made for. This was who she was. The minutes crawled past. 10, 5, 2, 1. Ghost's hand came up. Go. They moved. The wall was 12 feet high, topped with razor wire that caught starlight like broken glass. Ghost reached it first, pressing a shaped charge against the concrete with the practiced efficiency of a man who'd blown things up for a living. The charge was small, precise, designed to create a man-sized hole without announcing their presence to everyone within a mile. 5 seconds, 4, 3, 2, 1. The explosion was muffled, more of a deep thump than a bang. Concrete dust billowed into the night air as a section of wall collapsed inward, creating an opening just wide enough for a man to slip through. Ghost went first, weapon up, scanning for threats. Wraith followed, then Garrett, then Sarah. Dutch brought up the rear, moving slower but still moving, his breathing labored but controlled. They were inside the compound. The courtyard was empty, exactly as the intelligence had predicted. Guard rotation had pulled the sentries to the far side of the complex, leaving this sector unwatched for exactly 90 seconds. 83 seconds now. The clock was ticking. Ghost sprinted across the open ground toward the main building, his footsteps silent on the packed dirt. The team followed in tactical formation, covering each other, weapons tracking potential threats. Sarah's heart rate stayed steady, her breathing controlled. This was familiar territory. The breach, the assault, the controlled violence of men and women who'd done this so many times it had become muscle memory. 60 seconds. The building's rear entrance was locked. Wraith produced a set of picks, worked the mechanism with fingers that moved like a surgeon's. 3 seconds. 4. 5. The lock clicked open. Too long. They were bleeding time. 50 seconds. Inside, the building was dark and close, smelling of bodies and cooking oil, and the particular stench of a place where too many people lived in too little space. A hallway stretched ahead, doors on either side, stairs at the far end leading up. Second floor, northwest corner. That's where Hawk would be. Ghost took point up the stairs, moving with agonizing slowness, testing each step before committing his weight. Old buildings creaked, and creaking meant detection. Behind him, the team ascended in a line, each operator maintaining contact with the one ahead, a chain of warriors bound by trust and training. 30 seconds. The second floor hallway was longer than it had looked on the satellite imagery. 6 doors, 3 on each side. Sarah counted them off as they passed. 1, 2, 3. The northwest corner room would be the 4th door on the left. 20 seconds. Ghost reached the door, pressed his ear against it, listening. Sarah held her breath, her finger on the trigger guard, ready for whatever came next. Ghost's hand came up in a signal. One person inside. Movement. Could be Hawk. Could be a guard. Or the man. No way to know until they committed. 10 seconds. Ghost tried the door handle. Locked. Wraith moved forward with his picks, but Garrett stopped him with a gesture. No time. He raised his boot and kicked the door just beside the lock. The wood splintered with a crack that sounded like thunder in the enclosed space. The door flew open and Ghost was through before the echoes faded, weapon up, moving to the corner of the room. Clear. Sarah followed him in, her rifle tracking left while Wraith covered right. The room was small, maybe 12 feet square, with a single window covered by a heavy curtain. A cot in the corner, a bucket in the opposite corner, nothing else. And on the cot, chained to the wall, was a man. He was thin, too thin, with a beard that had grown wild and matted. His clothes were rags, his feet bare, his hands scarred with old injuries that had healed badly. But his eyes, when they opened and focused on Sarah, were clear, lucid, alive. Hawk. 4 years fell away in an instant. Sarah was back on the rooftop in Raqqa, watching him fall, unable to save him, carrying that failure like stones in her pockets. And now here he was, alive, breathing, looking at her with an expression that held no accusation. Just recognition. Just relief. Reaper. His voice was rough, barely more than a whisper. But it was him, Marcus Sullivan. Hawk, Dutch's son, the man she'd left behind. We're getting you out of here. Sarah moved to the king, pulled out a compact bolt cutter from her vest. The chains were thick but old, weakened by years of moisture and neglect. The bolt cutter bit through the first link with a snap that seemed too loud. She worked faster, cutting through the remaining links while Wraith set up security at the door and Ghost monitored the hallway. Behind her, Dutch entered the room. He moved slowly, his face gray with pain and something else, something that looked like fear. Sarah watched as the old man approached the cot, as his eyes found his son's face, as recognition and grief and love crashed together in an expression that would haunt her forever. Marcus. Hawk's head turned, his eyes widened. For a long moment, he just stared as if seeing a ghost. Then tears began streaming down his face, cutting tracks through the grime. Dad. The word was broken, raw, carrying 4 years of captivity and 20 years of estrangement, and a lifetime of questions that had never been answered. Dutch dropped to his knees beside the cot, his hands reaching out to touch his son's face as if to confirm he was real. I'm here. I'm so sorry. I'm here. Sarah cut through the last chain and stepped back, giving them space. This moment belonged to them, not to her. She moved to the window, pulled back the curtain slightly, checked the courtyard below. Still empty. But for how long? We need to move. Garrett's voice was quiet but urgent. They'd been in the building for 3 minutes, blown their 90-second window by 2.5 minutes. Every second they stayed increased the chance of detection exponentially. Can he walk? Sarah turned to assess Hawk. He was trying to stand, but his legs weren't cooperating. 4 years of captivity, minimal exercise, poor nutrition. His body had atrophied despite his mind remaining sharp. I can walk. Hawk's voice was stronger now, determined. He made it to his feet with Dutch's help, swaying but standing. Not walk, maybe, but shuffle, hobble, move forward one step at a time. Good enough. Sarah keyed her radio. Wraith, Ghost, we're extracting. Let's move. They formed up in this hallway, Ghost on point, then Hawk supported between Dutch and Garrett, then Sarah and Wraith bringing up the rear. The descent down the stairs was agonizing, each step a negotiation between Hawk's determination and his body's limitations. Sarah kept her weapon up, scanning behind them, waiting for the shout or the gunshot that would signal discovery. It came as they reached the ground floor. A door opened at the end of the hallway. A young man emerged, maybe 19 or 20, wearing sweatpants and a t-shirt. Not a guard, Sarah realized, just someone who lived here, getting up to use the bathroom. His eyes went wide as he saw them, foreign soldiers in his building, armed and dangerous. He opened his mouth to scream. Sarah moved without thinking. 3 steps closed the distance, her hand clamping over his mouth before sound could escape. Her other hand found the pressure point on his neck, squeezing until his eyes rolled back and his body went limp. Not dead, just unconscious. He'd wake up in a few minutes with a headache and a story no one would believe. She lowered him to the floor and returned to the formation. Ghost was already at the rear exit, checking the courtyard. He turned back, his expression grim. We've got company. 4 guards moving this way. The timeline had collapsed. They'd been detected, or routine had brought the guards to this sector, or pure bad luck had put them in the wrong place at the wrong team. Didn't matter. They had to fight their way out now. Alternate route. Garrett's voice was calm, command voice, the tone that said he'd been in worse situations and survived. Northeast corner, through the kitchen, out the side door. Move. They reversed direction, moving back through the building toward the kitchen Ghost had identified in the briefings. Sarah could hear voices now, shouting in Arabic, the rapid conversation of men who'd found something wrong and were alerting others. The compound was waking up, transforming from quiet facility to active combat zone. The kitchen was industrial, designed to feed 30 or 40 people. Steel tables, large stoves, a door that led to the exterior. Ghost hit the door at a run, shouldered it open, rolled through into the darkness beyond. Sarah heard the double tap of suppressed gunfire, heard a body hit the ground. 1 guard down. How many more? They poured through the door into a storage area, crates and supplies stacked along the walls. Another door ahead, Asayana. This one leading to the perimeter. Wraith took point this time, moving fast, weapon up. Sarah helped Dutch support Hawk, who was flagging now, his burst of adrenaline fading into exhaustion. Almost there, keep moving. The exterior door led to the compound's northeast corner, a narrow passage between buildings that terminated at the perimeter wall, 50 meters to freedom. Might as well have been 50 miles. Floodlights blazed to life, turning night into day. Sirens began to wail, their rising and falling tones designed to disorient and terrify. Sarah's night vision goggles whited out, useless in the sudden glare. She ripped them off, letting them fall on their retention strap, bringing her rifle up to her shoulder. Contact front. Ghost's call was almost drowned out by the sudden eruption of gunfire. Muzzle flashes strobed in the darkness beyond the floodlights as militia fighters opened up with automatic weapons. Concrete exploded around them, chips and dust filling the air. Sarah returned fire, controlled bursts, aiming for the flashes since she couldn't see the targets clearly. Wraith was down. Sarah saw him fall, clutching his leg, his weapon clattering away. She grabbed his vest, dragged him behind a concrete barrier, checked the wound. Through and through, missed the bone, bleeding but not arterial. He'd live if they could get him out. Ghost! Sarah's voice cut through the chaos. Smoke. The Scottish operator didn't hesitate. He pulled a smoke grenade from his vest, yanked the pin, threw it toward the enemy positions. The grenade detonated with a soft pop, gray smoke billowing into the compound, obscuring sight lines. In the confusion, Ghost advanced, his weapon firing steadily, suppressing the enemy. Wraith tried to stand, grunting with pain but determined. Sarah helped him up, supporting his weight on one side. Garrett had Hawk, Dutch between them. They moved toward the breach point in the wall, toward freedom, toward home. The passage narrowed. Wraith stumbled, nearly fell. Sarah caught him, adjusted her grip, kept moving. Behind them, the militia fighters were regrouping, their fire becoming more organized, more dangerous. Bullets cracked past, too close, the supersonic snap of rounds that had missed by inches. They reached the wall where Ghost had blown the initial breach. The hole was still there, partially collapsed but passable. Ghost went through first, providing cover fire from the other side. Then Hawk, pushed through by Dutch and Garrett. Then Wraith, limping but moving under his own power. Then Sarah. As she cleared the wall, she turned back for Dutch and Garrett. The old man was struggling, his movements jerky and uncoordinated. The cancer, the exertion, the stress, all of it crashing down at once. Garrett had him by the arm, half carrying him, returning fire with his offhand. A fighter emerged from the smoke, rifle raised. Sarah's muscle memory took over. Front sight, press, follow through. The fighter went down. Another appeared, same sequence. Down. Her magazine ran dry. She dropped it, loaded a fresh one, charging handle back and forward, ready again. All of it automatic, burned into her brain by thousands of repetitions. Garrett and Dutch reached the wall. Sarah grabbed Dutch's other arm, pulled him through the opening. The old man's face was slack, his breathing shallow. Not good. Getting worse. But they were out of the compound now, in the open desert, the rally point 500 meters away. Ghost's voice crackled over the radio. "We have pursuit, multiple contacts, vehicles inbound. Run." They ran. Garrett and Sarah half carrying Dutch between them, Hawk limping along with Ghost, Wraith bringing up the rear despite his wounded leg, firing controlled bursts at the pursuers who poured through the breach in the wall. The desert was chaos, darkness and muzzle flashes, and the crack of bullets passing too close. 200 meters, 300. The pursuit was faltering, the militia fighters reluctant to venture too far from their compound, uncertain how many attackers they faced, unwilling to risk ambush in the darkness. But they were still shooting, still dangerous, bullets kicking up sand around the fleeing Americans. Ghost pulled something from his vest as they ran. Sarah recognized it immediately. Remote detonator. The explosive charges he'd planted along their infiltration route, insurance in case they needed to create obstacles during exfiltration. He pressed the button. Behind them, 3 separate explosions tore through the night, not large but positioned perfectly to block the main pursuit routes from the compound. Secondary explosions followed as the charges ignited fuel stores Ghost had identified during their approach. Fire bloomed in the darkness, casting long shadows across the desert. The explosions bought them time. 30 seconds, maybe a minute, enough to reach the rally point, to establish a defensive position to call for extraction. 400 meters. Sarah's lungs were burning, the scar tissue from Raqqa protesting the exertion. Dutch was dead weight now, unconscious or close to it, his body failing him at the worst possible moment. Garrett's face was a mask of determination, jaw set, eyes locked on the rally point ahead. 500 meters. They collapsed into the shelter of the rock formation, gasping, checking weapons, assessing damage. Wraith's leg was bleeding steadily, a dark stain spreading on his pants. Dutch was unconscious, his pulse weak and thready. Hawk was in shock, his eyes distant, his body shaking. Sarah keyed her radio, called the extraction frequency. Catherine, this is Reaper. Package secured, 1 wounded, 1 critical. Request immediate extraction. Catherine Reed's voice came back, crisp and professional. Extraction bird inbound, ETA 12 minutes. Can you hold? Sarah looked at her team. Wraith wounded but functional. Garrett exhausted but solid. Ghost covering their 6th with professional competence. And Hawk broken by grief but alive, which was what mattered. We can hold. The 12 minutes stretched like hours. Sarah organized their defensive position, placed Ghost and Garrett at the flanks, kept Wraith and Hawk in the center where they'd be protected. She checked ammunition, distributed what little they had left evenly among the shooters. They were down to maybe 30 rounds per person, enough for 1 more fight if it came to that, not enough for 2. The militia fighters were regrouping in the distance. Sarah could see their lights moving, hear their vehicles starting. They'd be coming, and in greater numbers. The Americans had kicked the Hornets' nest, and now the Hornets were angry. 8 minutes. Movement on the perimeter. Sarah raised her rifle, acquired the target through her scope. A pickup truck with a technical mounted in the back, one of those improvised fighting vehicles with a heavy machine gun welded to the bed. It was racing toward their position, the gunner already traversing his weapon. Contact vehicle, 2 o'clock. Ghost fired first, a long burst that stitched across the truck's windshield. The vehicle swerved, lost control, flipped onto its side in a spray of dust and debris. The gunner was thrown clear, landed hard, didn't move. The driver stumbled out of the cab, disoriented. Garrett put him down with a controlled pair of shots. Wraith spoke up from his position, his Irish accent thicker with pain and adrenaline. That's the last of my ammunition. I'm Winchester. Sarah tossed him her backup magazine. Make it count. 6 minutes. More vehicles were moving now, a coordinated assault developing. Sarah counted at least 4 trucks, maybe more behind them. 30 or 40 fighters probably. Against 4 effective shooters with limited ammunition and 1 man who needed to be carried. The math wasn't good. She pulled out her last fragmentation grenade, a baseball-sized sphere of death that she'd been saving for exactly this kind of situation. Pulled the pin, held the spoon, waited for the trucks to close. They were spreading out now, trying to flank the American position. Smart, disciplined. These weren't amateurs. 4 minutes. The first truck reached effective range. Sarah threw the grenade, watched it arc through the darkness, detonate beside the vehicle in a flash of fire and shrapnel. The truck jerked to a halt, its occupants bailing out, some moving, some not. The other vehicles accelerated, trying to get past the kill zone before the Americans could inflict more casualties. Garrett and Ghost were firing steadily now, controlled bursts that dropped fighters with mechanical efficiency. But there were too many targets, too much ground to cover. Sarah saw fighters reaching the flanks, setting up positions, preparing to enfilade the American redoubt. 2 minutes. Sarah's rifle ran dry. Last magazine. She loaded it, chambered the first round, continued firing. Each shot carefully aimed, each shot counting because there wouldn't be many more. Beside her, Hawk had picked up Dutch's rifle, was firing despite his condition. Not accurate, his hands shaking too badly, but adding volume, forcing the enemy to keep their heads down. Ghost turned to Sarah, his Scottish accent somehow calm despite the chaos. Senior Chief, been an honor serving with you. Likewise, Ghost. Sarah fired again, dropped another fighter. Tell me something, where'd you get the call sign? Demolitions accident in Kandahar. Ghost grinned despite the situation. Blew myself up so thoroughly they thought I was dead for about 10 seconds. When I stood up, covered in dust, someone said I looked like a ghost. Name stuck. Wraith chimed in, reloading with his last magazine. Mine's simpler. I'm Irish. I'm quiet, and I can get through places that shouldn't be possible. Like a wraith. Unimaginative, I know. Sarah found herself almost laughing despite everything. 2 professionals making small talk while the world exploded around them. There was something beautifully absurd about it. 1 minute. Sarah heard it before she saw it. The distinctive whoop, whoop, whoop of helicopter rotors cutting through the night air. The extraction bird, coming in fast and low, its door gunner already firing into the militia positions with a minigun that sounded like the world's angriest chainsaw. The Black Hawk flared hard, rotors biting air, settling into a hover just long enough for the skids to touch rocky ground. The crew chief was screaming at them to move, 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 his words barely audible over the rotor wash and gunfire. Garrett grabbed Hawk, half carried him to the bird, lifted him into the cargo bay. Ghost helped Wraith, who was hobbling on his wounded leg but still moving under his own power. Sarah ran back for Dutch's body, refusing to leave him behind, refusing to let him become another statistic, another missing warrior whose family would never know what happened. Garrett appeared beside her, helped lift the body. Together they carried Dutch to the helicopter, laid him in the cargo bay with reverence. Then Sarah was climbing aboard, Garrett behind her, the crew chief already signaling the pilot to lift off. The Black Hawk rose into the night sky, banking hard, accelerating away from the compound and the gunfire and the rocky hillside where a good man had died doing what he'd always done, serving, protecting, choosing mission over safety right up to the final breath. Sarah collapsed against the bulkhead, her body shaking with exhaustion and adrenaline crash. Across from her, Hawk sat with his father's body, his hand resting on the old man's chest, tears flowing unchecked. Garrett sat beside him, not speaking, just present, bearing witness to grief that couldn't be fixed, only endured. The helicopter climbed to altitude, heading south toward Jordan and safety. Sarah closed her eyes, but sleep wouldn't come. Her mind kept replaying the mission, the breach, the extraction, Dutch's final words. The cost had been high, one good man dead, one wounded, countless enemies killed. And for what? To rescue one prisoner, to bring one man home. She looked at Hawk, at the broken warrior who'd endured 4 years of captivity and come out the other side with his mind intact. She thought about Cole waiting at Fort Bragg, unaware that his grandfather had died saving his father. She thought about Emma, her daughter, who'd grown up without her mother, just like Cole had grown up without knowing his family. Dutch had been right. The mistakes you made with family couldn't be fixed. They could only be learned from, built upon, transformed into wisdom that kept others from making the same errors. The flight back to Jordan took 3 hours. Sarah spent the time checking on Wraith, whose leg wound was stable but would require surgery, and sitting with Hawk, who drifted in and out of a fugue state that wasn't quite sleep and wasn't quite waking. The man needed medical attention, psychological evaluation, time to process what had happened. But he was alive. They'd kept the promise. No one left behind. Well, one left behind, but Dutch had made that choice himself, knowing what it would cost, accepting the price. That was the warrior's way. Choose the mission, choose your people, choose something larger than yourself. And if the choosing killed you, at least you died for something that mattered. They landed at the forward operating base in Jordan as dawn was breaking. Medical personnel rushed forward to take Wraith and Hawk, strapping them to gurneys, wheeling them toward the field hospital. Sarah stood in the rotor wash and watched them go, feeling empty, hollow, like something essential had been carved out of her chest. Garrett found her standing alone on the tarmac, staring at nothing. The colonel looked 10 years older than he had 24 hours ago, his face drawn, his eyes haunted. He died well. Sarah nodded. Doesn't make it hurt less. No, it doesn't. Garrett was quiet for a moment. I've lost people before. In Desert Storm, in Iraq, in Afghanistan. You never get used to it, never stops feeling like a failure even when you know you did everything right. Dutch didn't fail. He got his son back. And it killed him. Garrett's voice was rough. Makes you wonder if the cost is ever worth it. If anything we do matters in the long run. Sarah turned to look at him. It matters to Hawk. It matters to Cole. It matters to everyone who needed to know that we don't abandon our people. That even after 4 years, even when it seems impossible, we still come for them. You believe that? I have to. Sarah's voice was fierce. Because if I don't believe it, then what was the point of any of this? Why did Dutch die? Why did Yasmin die? Why did any of them die if not to prove that some things are worth dying for? Garrett nodded slowly. You're right. You're absolutely right. I just wish it didn't cost so much. They stood together in the dawn light, two warriors who'd been enemies and become brothers through shared mission and shared loss. Behind them, the ground crew was prepping the Black Hawk for the next leg of the journey. Ahead of them lay the long trip home, debriefings, funerals, the administrative machinery that processed death and loss and sacrifice. Catherine Reed appeared from the operations center, tablet in hand, her face professionally neutral, but Sarah could see the strain underneath. Senior Chief Colonel, we need to discuss the after-action. There are complications. What kind of complications? Catherine hesitated, choosing her words carefully. The compound you hit. Russian advisors were present during the assault. 2 of them were in the communications building. They called Moscow during the firefight, reported American Special Operations Forces conducting unauthorized raid on Syrian territory. Sarah felt cold dread settle in her stomach. How bad? Bad enough that the Kremlin is demanding explanations, threatening diplomatic consequences. State Department is scrambling to contain the damage. She looked at them both. Washington wants to disavow the operation, claim it was unauthorized, rogue actors, not sanctioned by U.S. government. They want to burn you. Like hell. Garrett's voice was steel. We followed orders. Pierce authorized the mission. JSOC signed off. This was legitimate. Legitimate and classified. Catherine's expression was sympathetic, which means they can make it disappear. Make you disappear. Claim it never happened. The official story can be whatever they want it to be. What about Hawk? What about Wraith? You can't disappear them. They can claim Hawk was rescued by a different team, different operation. Wraith was injured in training. The official story can be whatever serves the political agenda. Catherine looked at Sarah. I'm sorry. I fought this. Pierce fought this. But the decision came from above our pay grade. They want political cover, and you're what they're willing to sacrifice to get it. Sarah laughed, a bitter sound without humor. Of course, we do the impossible. Bring home a prisoner everyone else wrote off as dead, lose a good man doing it. And their response is to pretend we don't exist. Welcome to the world of black operations. Catherine's voice was flat. Where doing the right thing is its own punishment. They were flown back to the States under cover of darkness, landing at a military airfield that didn't officially exist. Pierce was waiting, his weathered face grave. He shook their hands, thanked them for their service, and explained in careful bureaucratic language that their mission would never be acknowledged, their sacrifices never recognized, their names never mentioned. Dutch would receive a military funeral, but the official cause of death would be complications from cancer, not enemy action. His Bronze Star from the mission would be presented posthumously but classified, locked in a vault where his family couldn't see it. Hawk would be debriefed and returned to active duty with no explanation for where he'd been or who'd rescued him. The Guardian program would continue, but Sarah's role in the Syria operation would be erased from all records. Clean, tidy, politically convenient. Everything the public would never know about the price of security. Sarah stood at attention while Pierce delivered the official verdict, her face neutral, her emotions locked down behind years of professional discipline. But inside, she was screaming. Inside, she wanted to rage at the injustice of it all. Dutch deserved better. They all deserve better. When Pierce finished, he dismissed everyone except Sarah. The others filed out, leaving them alone in the secure conference room. Pierce's professional mask cracked, revealing the man underneath. The old warrior who'd spent his career making impossible choices and living with the consequences. This isn't right. No, sir, it's not. You did everything I asked. Brought him home. Lost a good man doing it. And now they want to pretend it never happened. Pierce's hands clenched into fists. Makes me ashamed to wear this uniform. Don't be. Sarah's voice was quiet. Dutch knew what he was signing up for. We all did. Black operations mean black consequences. The only thing that matters is whether it was worth it. Was it? Sarah thought about Hawk, reunited with a son who didn't know he existed. Thought about Cole, who'd get his father back even if he never knew the full story of how. Thought about Emma, her daughter, and the chance she'd get to rebuild that relationship if she had the courage to try home. Yes, sir, it was worth it. Pierce nodded, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. The Guardian program is yours now. Dutch made that clear before he left. Train them right, Sarah. Make sure the next generation understands what this life costs. Make sure they're ready to pay it. I will. Good. Dismissed. Sarah left the conference room, walked through the base in the pre-dawn darkness, her mind numb. She should feel something. Relief that the mission succeeded. Grief for Dutch's death. Anger at the bureaucratic betrayal. But all she felt was empty, hollowed out, scraped clean of emotion. Her phone buzzed. A text from Rachel Vega. You're back. Coffee. Sarah stared at the message for a long moment. She could ignore it, could drive to her apartment, could pour herself a drink and let the numbness become permanent. That would be easy, familiar, safe. Or she could choose differently. Could choose connection over isolation, hope over despair, the hard work of healing over the easy comfort of self-destruction. She typed back, 0600, I'll be there. Then she drove to the hospital where Hawk was being treated, badged through security, found his room. He was awake, sitting up in bed, his eyes clearer than they'd been on the helicopter. He looked up as she entered, managed a weak smile. Reaper, Hawk. They sat in silence for a moment. Outside the window, Fort Bragg was waking up. Another day in the endless cycle of training and deployment and sacrifice. My dad, did he? He died saving you, getting you home. Sarah's voice was gentle. It's what he wanted, his last mission. He got to look you in the eye, got to tell you he was proud. Not many people get that chance. I wasted 20 years. 20 years we could have had. You can't go back. Only forward. Sarah met his eyes. You have a son. Cole, he's here on base, training. Dutch wanted you to be there for him, to not make the same mistakes. Hawk nodded, tears flowing again. I don't know how to be a father. My old man was never around. How do I do something I never learned? You figure it out. One day at a time, one choice at a time. Sarah stood. I have to go. But Hawk, you're not alone. That's what matters. You're home. You're alive. The rest you can work through. Thank you for coming back, for keeping your promise. No one left behind. Sarah left the hospital as the sun was rising, painting the sky in shades of gold and red. Red sky at morning, sailor take warning, but the warning had already come and gone. They'd survived. That was enough. At 0600 exactly, she walked into the coffee shop on base. Rachel was there, sitting in the same corner booth, reading the same paperback novel. When she saw Sarah, her face transformed with relief and joy and something that looked like hope. Sarah bought 2 coffees and walked to the booth, set 1 cup in front of Rachel and slid into the seat across from her. Neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. Sometimes presence was enough. After a while, Rachel reached across the table and took Sarah's hand. Her touch was warm, solid, real. An anchor in a world that often felt like it was spinning out of control. Welcome home. Sarah squeezed her hand, felt something inside her chest unclench slightly. Not healing yet, but starting to. Beginning the long journey from broken to whole, from ghost to guardian, from isolation to connection. Thank you. They sat like that as the coffee shop filled with early morning customers. Soldiers grabbing breakfast before PT. Officers heading to their desks. The ordinary rhythm of military life. The routine that continued regardless of the sacrifices made in darkness by people whose names would never be known. Sarah's phone buzzed. A message from Pierce. Report to my office at 1300. We need to discuss your new position as director of the Guardian program. She put the phone away. Plenty of time to deal with the future. Right now, in this moment, drinking coffee with a woman who'd chosen to see past her defenses, Sarah was content to just be present, to exist without the weight of mission or guilt or expectation. It wouldn't last, couldn't last. There would be work to do, warriors to train, Dutch's legacy to honor. But for this one morning, Sarah Kincaid allowed herself something she hadn't permitted in 4 years. Peace. The funeral was small, private, attended only by those who'd earned the right to be there through blood or brotherhood or both. Master Sergeant Victor Brennan was laid to rest with full military honors in a corner of Arlington National Cemetery, reserved for warriors who'd served in conflicts the public would never know about. The headstone was simple. Name, rank, dates of birth and death. Nothing about Vietnam, nothing about Syria, nothing about the 50 years of service in between. Just another soldier going into the ground while a bugler played taps and 7 riflemen fired 3 volleys into a gray November sky. Sarah stood at attention in her dress uniform, the one she'd pulled from the back of her closet and discovered still fit despite 4 years of trying to forget she'd ever worn it. The Navy cross on her chest felt heavy, a weight she'd earned in Raqqa and never wanted to carry again. But Dutch deserved the respect of full dress, deserved to see that the warriors he'd trained still remembered what honor meant. Beside her, Hawk stood in a wheelchair, his legs not yet strong enough to support his weight for the duration of the ceremony. 4 years of captivity had taken a physical toll that would require months of therapy to overcome. But his mind was clear. his eyes dry. He'd done his crying in private, in the hospital room where Sarah had found him at 3 in the morning, staring at the ceiling and remembering every conversation he'd never had with his father. Garrett was there too, standing rigid as an iron post, his face carved from stone. The colonel had put in his retirement papers the day after they'd returned from Syria. 30 years of service ending not with a promotion or a ceremony, but with a quiet exit from a system that had used him up and was ready to discard him. He'd told Sarah over coffee that morning that he was tired. Tired of making compromises. Tired of watching good people die for decisions made by men who'd never heard a shot fired in anger. Tired of being part of a machine that valued political convenience over truth. The flag was folded with military precision, each crease exact, each movement choreographed by years of practice. Pierce accepted it on behalf of Dutch's family, since technically Dutch had no next of kin. His ex-wife had died 5 years ago from cancer. His son had been listed as killed in action until 3 days ago. There was no one else. Except there was. In the third row, standing slightly apart from the official mourners, was a young man in army fatigues. 19 years old, lean and fit, with Dutch's eyes and Hawk's jaw. Private Cole Brennan, who'd been given emergency leave to attend the funeral of a grandfather he'd never known existed until a colonel he'd never met knocked on his barracks door and told him his father was alive and his grandfather was dead, and nothing he'd believed about his family had been true. Sarah watched Cole's face during the ceremony, saw the confusion there, the anger, the grief for a man he'd never had the chance to know. She tried to talk to him yesterday, to explain about the mission, about Dutch's sacrifice, but the kid had shut down, retreated behind a wall of professional courtesy that let nothing through. Yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, I understand, ma'am. The words of a soldier who'd learned that feelings were dangerous and distance was safety. She understood that better than most. The ceremony ended. The mourners dispersed slowly, reluctant to leave, as if staying at the graveside could somehow delay the finality of death. Sarah remained at attention until everyone else had gone, until it was just her and the fresh-turned earth and the headstone that would weather and fade and eventually be forgotten by everyone except those who'd known what the name on it really meant. You were right, Master Sergeant. About everything. I was running, I was broken. I was wasting what I had left. But I'm not running anymore. She saluted the grave, held it for a long moment, then turned and walked away. Behind her, the cemetery stretched in neat rows, thousands of white stones marking thousands of lives that had ended in service to something larger than themselves. The math was overwhelming if you thought about it too long. All those deaths, all that sacrifice, and the world kept turning, kept forgetting, kept making the same mistakes. But individuals remembered. That had to count for something. Pierce found her in the parking lot, leaning against her truck, staring at nothing. The colonel looked older in the gray morning light, the lines on his face deeper, his shoulders carrying a weight that seemed to increase daily. Walk with me. They walked through the cemetery in silence, past graves that dated back to the Civil War, past monuments to wars both famous and forgotten. Finally, Pierce spoke. The disavowal's official. The mission to Syria never happened. The team that went in doesn't exist. Dutch died of cancer complications at Walter Reed. That's the official record, and it's sealed. Sarah nodded. She'd expected as much. Black operations stayed black, even when they succeeded, especially when they succeeded. What about Hawk? He'll be debriefed by CIA, then returned to limited duty status pending full medical clearance. The official story is that he was held by a criminal organization for ransom, eventually escaped on his own. No SEAL team, no rescue operation, just a fortunate escape. Does he know? Pierce's expression was grim. He knows, doesn't like it, but he understands the game. 4 years as a prisoner taught him that truth is often the first casualty of politics. They reached a bench overlooking the Potomac River. Pierce sat heavily, and Sarah joined him. For a moment, they just watched the water flow past, dark and cold in the November morning. The Guardian program is officially yours now. Full authorization, black budget, complete operational control. You'll report directly to me, but day-to-day decisions are yours. Pierce looked at her. Dutch built something important, Sarah, a way to salvage warriors who still have something to give. Don't let his death be the end of that legacy. I won't. Good. Pierce pulled an envelope from his jacket, handed it to her. Dutch wrote this 3 days before the mission, asked me to give it to you if he didn't come back. Sarah took the envelope with hands that wanted to shake, but didn't. The paper was thick, expensive, the kind Dutch would have saved for something important. Her name was written on the front in the old man's careful script. Read it when you're ready. No rush. Pierce stood, his knees creaking with the movement. I have to get back. The bureaucratic vultures are circling, wanting to know why a cancer-riddled master sergeant was in Syria when he should have been in hospice. I need to manufacture lies convincing enough to make them stop asking questions. Thank you, sir, for everything. Thank you, Senior Chief, for bringing him home. Even if we can't acknowledge it publicly, even if the record is scrubbed clean, I want you to know that what you did mattered. Dutch knew it. Hawk knows it. That's enough. Pierce walked away, leaving Sarah alone with the envelope and the weight of expectation. She sat on the bench for a long time before opening it, watching the river flow, gathering courage to read the last words of a man who'd seen something in her worth saving. Finally, she opened the envelope and began to read. Sarah, if you're reading this, I'm dead and you're not, which means the mission succeeded. Good. Marcus needed to come home, and you were the only one I trusted to make it happen. I'm not good with words. 50 years in the Corps, and I still can't articulate what I feel half the time. But I need you to understand something. When I found you 4 years ago, broken and drinking and trying very hard to disappear, I saw myself. Saw the man I'd been after Vietnam, after I'd lost Williams, and couldn't figure out how to live with the guilt of surviving when better men died. It took me 30 years to find purpose again. 30 years of going through the motions, of being a good Marine, but a terrible human being. I don't want that for you. Don't waste decades like I did. Don't let the guilt win. The Guardian program is my attempt to balance the scales. Every warrior we save, every life we rebuild, that's one small victory against the darkness. You're better at this than I ever was. You understand broken in ways I couldn't. Use that. Turn your pain into purpose. And for God's sake, call your daughter. Emma deserves better than an absent mother, and you deserve the chance to be the parent I never was to Marcus. Don't make my mistakes. The years pass faster than you think, and regret is a heavy burden to carry to the grave. I'm proud of you, Senior Chief. Proud of who you were, proud of who you're becoming. Whatever happens next, know that you made a difference. You brought me home in the only way that mattered. You gave me a chance to look my son in the eye before I died. That's a gift beyond measure. Semper Fi. Dutch. Sarah folded the letter carefully, slipped it back into the envelope, and sat staring at the river while tears she'd been holding back for days finally broke free. Not the violent sobbing of fresh grief, but the quiet, steady tears of someone processing loss and acceptance, and the strange relief that came from knowing a good man had died satisfied. Her phone buzzed. A text from Rachel. Lunch. My place. Come when you're ready. Sarah typed back. On my way. Rachel's house was a small bungalow on the outskirts of Fayetteville, the kind of place a supply officer could afford on military salary and careful budgeting. The yard was neat, the paint fresh, window boxes full of flowers that had somehow survived the early frost. A home, not just a house. The distinction mattered. Rachel answered the door wearing jeans and a sweater, her hair down instead of the tight bun regulations required on base. She looked younger like this, softer, more approachable. She took one look at Sarah's face and pulled her into a hug without speaking. They stood like that in the doorway for a long moment, Sarah accepting comfort she didn't think she deserved, Rachel offering it without expectation or judgment. When they separated, Rachel led her inside to a kitchen that smelled of roasted chicken and fresh bread. You didn't have to cook. I wanted to. Rachel poured wine, red and rich. Besides, I'm Italian. We process emotion through food. Sit. Sarah sat at the kitchen table and watched Rachel move through the space with practiced efficiency. Everything about this moment was foreign to her. The domestic setting, the casual intimacy, the simple human connection without the weight of mission or duty. She'd forgotten what normal felt like. Rachel set plates on the table, served chicken and vegetables and bread that was still warm from the oven. They ate in comfortable silence, the kind that exists between people who understand that not everything needs to be spoken. Finally, Rachel set down her fork and looked at Sarah directly. Tell me about him, about Dutch. Sarah wasn't sure where to start. His combat record, his failures as a father, his terminal diagnosis, his final mission. It all ran together, a life too complex to summarize in a few sentences. He saved me. That's what matters. I was drowning and he threw me a line. Didn't make it easy, didn't coddle me, just gave me a purpose worth staying sober for. And now I have to figure out if I can carry what he built. If I'm strong enough to train warriors when I'm still figuring out how to be one again. Rachel reached across the table, took Sarah's hand. You're stronger than you think. The fact that you're asking the question means you understand the weight of it. The dangerous people are the ones who never doubt themselves. Sarah squeezed her hand, grateful for the anchor. Dutch's letter. He told me to call my daughter, to not make his mistakes. Are you going to? I don't know. 2 years of silence. What do I even say? Hey, Emma, sorry I've been absent. I was busy drinking myself to death and then rescuing a prisoner in Syria. Want to get ice cream? Rachel smiled despite the darkness of the words. You start with I'm sorry, then you keep showing up. Keep trying, keep proving through action that you're different now. Kids are resilient. They forgive faster than adults. What if she doesn't want to talk to me? Then you keep trying anyway. Send letters, emails, cards. Let her know you're there even if she's not ready to respond. Eventually, if you're consistent, if you prove you've changed, she'll come around. You sound like you know from experience. My sister. Rachel's expression grew distant. She's 10 years younger. I practically raised her after our mom died. Then I joined the army, deployed 3 times, missed her wedding, missed the birth of her first kid. She stopped talking to me for 2 years. Said I'd abandoned her, that I'd chosen the military over family. What happened? I kept showing up, sent birthday cards, Christmas presents, letters that she probably threw away without reading. Then my husband died in Afghanistan, and she was the first person at my door. Told me family was family, that she'd been angry but never stopped loving me. Rachel's eyes glistened. Sometimes you have to be patient. Let time and consistency do the work that words can't. Sarah nodded, filing the advice away for when she found the courage to act on it. They finished lunch, cleaned the dishes together, moved to the living room where Rachel had a fire going in the fireplace. The warmth was physical and emotional, pushing back against the November cold. Rachel sat close on the couch, close enough that their shoulders touched. Not pushing, not demanding, just offering presence. Sarah leaned into the contact, accepting comfort she was still learning how to receive. What happens now? Rachel's voice was quiet. With you, with the program. I report to Pierce tomorrow. Start building the curriculum, recruiting instructors, identifying candidates. Dutch left detailed notes, but there's still work to do. Decisions to make. Sarah paused. And I need to talk to Cole, Hawk's son. He's angry, confused. Needs to understand why his grandfather kept him at a distance. That's not your responsibility. Maybe not, but Dutch asked me to look after his family, and Cole is part of that family whether he knows it yet or not. They sat in silence, watching the fire burn down to embers. Sarah felt Rachel's hand find hers, fingers interlacing. The touch was electric, charged with possibility. Not rushed, not desperate, just 2 people who'd found each other in the wreckage of their separate griefs and were building something new from the ruins. Stay tonight. Rachel's words were an invitation, not a demand. Sarah could say no, could retreat to her empty apartment and her solitary grief. Could maintain the wall she'd built so carefully. Or she could stay. Could choose connection over isolation, hope over despair. Could take the risk of letting someone see the broken pieces and trusting they wouldn't run. Okay, they moved to the bedroom as the fire died, as the night deepened outside, as Fort Bragg settled into its nocturnal rhythm. What happened between them was gentle, tentative. 2 wounded people learning how to be vulnerable again. Not about passion or release, but about the simple human need to be known, to be accepted, to be less alone. Afterwards, Sarah lay in the darkness with Rachel's head on her shoulder, listening to the rhythm of her breathing, feeling something she hadn't felt in years. Not happiness, not yet, but the possibility of happiness. The foundation on which healing could be built. I'm scared. Sarah's admission came in the darkness, where honesty was easier. Scared I'm going to mess this up, that I'm going to let you down like I've let down everyone else. Then we'll figure it out together. Rachel's voice was drowsy, content. Nobody gets it right on the first try. We just keep trying until we do. Sarah closed her eyes, let exhaustion pull her under. For the first time in 4 years, she slept without dreams of Raqqa. Morning came too early, gray light filtering through curtains that didn't quite close. Sarah woke to find Rachel already up, making coffee in the kitchen, humming something under her breath. Domestic normalcy that felt surreal after so many years of isolation. She showered, dressed in the spare clothes Rachel had laid out, joined her in the kitchen. Coffee was poured without asking, exactly the way Sarah liked it. Strong, black, no sugar. Rachel had been paying attention. I have to go to base. Meeting with Pierce at 0800. I know. Rachel kissed her, quick and sweet. Come back tonight if you want. Or don't, no pressure. We figure this out at whatever pace works. Thank you. For what? For seeing me. The real me, and not running. Rachel smiled. I'm a widow who spent 7 years mourning a man I loved. I know about broken. Doesn't scare me. Sarah drove to Fort Bragg through morning traffic, her mind cycling through everything that needed to happen. The Guardian program required structure, curriculum, staff. She'd need instructors who understood trauma, who could teach without judgment. She'd need to identify candidates carefully, screen for those who could be saved versus those who were too far gone. She'd need Pierce's support navigating the bureaucracy that would inevitably try to strangle the program with regulations and oversight. Pierce's office was in the headquarters building, a corner suite with windows overlooking the training complex. The colonel was already there, coffee in hand, folders stacked on his desk. Senior Chief, sit. Sarah sat. Pierce slid a folder across the desk. Your first class, 20 candidates, all veterans, all struggling with transition. PTSD, substance abuse, failed relationships, the usual aftermath of combat. Your job is to sort through them, identify who can be salvaged, train them to train others. Sarah opened the folder, scanned the files. Names, ranks, service records. Stories of heroism followed by collapse. Warriors who'd survived the war but couldn't survive the peace. One file caught her attention. Corporal James Mitchell. 2 deployments to Afghanistan, Bronze Star, Purple Heart. Discharged after assaulting an officer who'd made a racist comment. Now working construction, living in a trailer park, drinking away nightmares. How do we recruit them? We don't. They volunteer. Word spreads in the veteran community about programs that actually help instead of just processing paperwork. You build credibility, they'll come. And funding. Black budget. No oversight, no questions. You need equipment, you get it. You need staff, you hire them. The only metric that matters is results. Pierce leaned forward. But understand, Sarah, this program exists in the shadows. One public scandal, one lawsuit, one veteran who goes off the rails after we've certified them, and we're done. The political cover disappears and we all get burned. I understand. Good. You start Monday. Use the weekend to set up, prepare your curriculum. Dutch left notes, but ultimately, this is your program now. Build it the way you think it needs to be built. Sarah spent the rest of the day at the training facility Dutch had secured for the Guardian program. It was an older building on the edge of the bomb, brick and concrete, with classrooms and a gym and a range out back. Not fancy, but functional. Everything a warrior needed, nothing they didn't. She found Garrett there wearing civilian clothes, measuring dimensions for equipment placement. He looked up as she entered, nodded greeting. Thought you retired, Colonel. I did. Garrett's smile was tired, but Dutch recruited me before Syria. Asked if I'd help train when the time came. Figured I owed him. Owed you. Owed everyone I've wronged over the years by being too rigid, too certain. You don't owe me anything. Maybe not. But I need this. Need to do something that matters. 30 years I spent enforcing rules, maintaining standards, treating the military like a machine that could be perfected through discipline. All it did was break good people. He gestured around the empty room. This is a chance to build something different, to recognize that warriors are human, that trauma is real, that strength comes in different forms. I want to be part of that. Sarah extended her hand. Welcome to the team. They shook, 2 former adversaries becoming allies through shared purpose. Garrett had already started organizing the equipment Dutch had ordered. Weights, training mats, therapy dogs for PTSD work, a shooting simulator for practicing judgment calls, classroom materials on trauma processing, meditation, family reintegration. We're going to need more instructors, people who understand both military culture and psychological recovery. I have some names. Garrett pulled out a list. therapists who served, retired NCOs who've done their own recovery work. People who can teach from experience, not theory. Set up interviews for next week. I want to meet everyone personally. They worked through to the afternoon, organizing the space, planning the curriculum. It was grunt work, physical and demanding, but it felt good, purposeful, building something instead of destroying, healing instead of breaking. At 1600 hours, Sarah's phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. This is Senior Chief Kincaid. The voice on the other end was young, male, tense. This is Private Cole Brennan. I need to talk to you about my grandfather, about everything. Sarah stepped outside for privacy when, now, if you're available, I'm at the cemetery, can't seem to leave. I'll be there in 20. The drive to Arlington took 40 minutes with traffic. Sarah found Cole sitting on the ground next to Dutch's grave, still in his uniform, his face streaked with dirt and tears. 19 years old and completely lost, trying to process information that had shattered everything he thought he knew about his family. Sarah sat down beside him, not speaking, just present. Sometimes that was enough. Finally, Cole spoke. My mom told me my dad died in combat when I was 2. Told me my grandfather died before I was born. I grew up believing I had no family except her. And now I find out they were both alive. Both chose to stay away. Sarah chose her words carefully. Your father didn't choose captivity. He was taken prisoner, held for 4 years. He thought about you every day. Your grandfather told me that. And my grandfather, why did he stay away? Because he was a coward. Sarah's bluntness made Cole look at her. Not in combat. Dutch was the bravest man I ever met in the field. But in life, in family, he was terrified. Terrified of failing, of being the kind of father his own father had been. So he chose distance, thinking it would hurt less than trying and failing. Cole wiped his eyes angrily. That's a coward's choice. Yes, it is. Sarah's voice was gentle. But it's also human. People make terrible decisions when they're scared. Your grandfather spent 20 years making the wrong choice, and it ate him alive. His last act was trying to fix it, trying to bring your father home so you could have the relationship he never built. Did he say anything? About me? Sarah nodded. He told your father to take care of you, to not make his mistakes, to choose family over duty. His last words were about making sure you had what he couldn't give. Cole was quiet for a long time, then, my dad wants to meet me. Hospital called, said he's strong enough now. I don't know if I'm ready. You don't have to be ready. You just have to show up. Sarah looked at Dutch's headstone. Your grandfather taught me that showing up is 90% of life. The rest you figure out as you go. Will you come with me? Cole's voice broke. To meet him, I don't think I can do it alone. Sarah thought about her own daughter, about the phone call she needed to make, about the courage it took to face your failures and try to build something better. She thought about Dutch, who died trying to fix his mistakes, about Rachel, who'd been patient with her sister until patience paid off. Yeah, I'll come. They drove to the hospital in Sarah's truck, Cole silent and tense beside her. The November afternoon was fading into evening, the sky streaked with red and gold. Red sky at night, sailor's delight. Maybe the storm had passed, maybe calmer waters were ahead. The hospital was military, institutional, but trying hard to be welcoming. Paintings on the walls, plants in the corners, staff who smiled instead of scowled. Hawk was in a private room on the 3rd floor, sitting up in bed, reading a paperback Western. He looked up as they entered, and the book fell from his hands. His eyes locked on Cole, and Sarah watched 4 years of captivity and 20 years of absence collide in a single moment of recognition. Marcus, my son. Cole stood frozen in the doorway, his face cycling through emotions too fast to track. Anger, grief, confusion, hope, all of it warring for dominance. Sarah stepped back, giving them space but staying close enough to intervene if needed. They told me you were dead. I know. Hawk's voice cracked. I'm sorry for all of it, for not being there, for letting you grow up thinking you were alone. You chose the military, just like grandfather. No, Hawk shook his head. I didn't choose the military over you. I was taken, captured. I spent 4 years in a cell thinking about you, wondering what you looked like, hoping you were okay. Every day I stayed alive because I believed I'd see you again. Cole took a step into the room, then another. His hands were clenched into fists, his body tense. Sarah could see him struggling, fighting between the desire to lash out and the need to connect. Why didn't grandfather tell me? that he was alive, that you were alive. Because I asked him not to. Hawk's eyes glistened. Because I didn't want you knowing I was captured. Didn't want you spending years wondering if I was being tortured, if I was suffering. Better to think I died quick than to live with that uncertainty. That wasn't your choice to make. No, it wasn't. And I'm sorry. Hawk extended his hand. I can't fix the past. Can't give you back the years we lost. But I'm here now, and I want to know you. Want to be your father if you'll let me. Cole stared at the offered hand for a long moment. Then slowly he reached out and took it. The handshake was brief, awkward, but it was contact. A bridge built across years of absence. Sarah slipped out of the room, leaving them to begin the hard work of building a relationship from nothing. In the hallway, she pulled out her phone and stared at Emma's contact information. 2 years of silence. 2 years of being a coward like Dutch had been a coward. Rachel's words echoed in her mind. Start with I'm sorry, then keep showing up. Sarah pressed dial before she could change her mind. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. She was preparing to leave a message when a young voice answered. Hello, Emma, it's Mom. Silence. Long enough that Sarah thought she'd hung up. Then, why are you calling? Because I'm sorry. For disappearing. For letting you down. For choosing my pain over being your mother. More silence. Sarah could hear breathing on the other end, could imagine her daughter's face, the confusion and anger and hurt that came from abandonment. It's been 2 years, I know, and I don't have an excuse good enough to justify that. I was broken, and instead of getting help, I ran away. From you, from your father, from everyone. But I'm trying to do better now, trying to be the person you deserve. What changed? Someone believed I could be more than my worst moments, gave me a chance to prove it. And now I want to give you the same thing, a chance to rebuild what I destroyed. Emma was quiet for so long, Sarah thought she'd lost her. Then, I have a school thing next Friday, a presentation about veterans. I could use help. Sarah felt tears burning behind her eyes. I'll be there, I promise. Okay, but Mom, if you don't show up, that's it. No more chances. I'll be there. They talked for another 10 minutes. Surface conversation about school and friends, and the safe topics that avoided the minefield of their relationship. When they hung up, Sarah leaned against the hospital wall and let herself shake with the release of tension she'd been carrying for 2 years. A hand touched her shoulder. She looked up to find Garrett standing there, his expression understanding. Good news or bad? Good, I think. Maybe. She has to learn to trust me again. That's the hardest part. Garrett's smile was sad. Earning back trust you destroyed, but it's worth it, even when it takes years. They walked to the parking lot together. 2 warriors who'd found their way back from darkness. The sun was setting, painting Fort Bragg in shades of gold and amber. Behind them in the hospital, a father and son were learning to talk. Ahead of them, the Guardian program waited to be built. Veterans waited to be saved. Sarah drove back to Rachel's house instead of her apartment. The door opened before she could knock, Rachel's smile warm with welcome. How did it go? Hard. Good. Sarah stepped inside, let the door close behind her. I called Emma. We talked. I'm seeing her next Friday. Rachel pulled her close, held her while Sarah finally let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, she could rebuild what she'd broken. That the years ahead didn't have to be defined by the years behind. Tomorrow, she'd start building the Guardian program. She'd train warriors to help other warriors, teaching them what Dutch had taught her. That broken didn't mean finished, that there was honor in rebuilding, in choosing to stand when staying down would be easier. But tonight, in Rachel's arms, Sarah allowed herself to be human, to be scared and hopeful and uncertain, to be all the things warriors weren't supposed to admit to being. The easy days were over. They'd been over since Raqqa, since Hawk fell, since everything shattered. But maybe that was okay. Maybe the hard days were where you found out what you were made of, where you learned that strength wasn't about never falling down. It was about getting up over and over until staying down was no longer an option. Sarah closed her eyes and let exhaustion pull her under. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new battles, new chances to fail or succeed. But tonight she rested. And for the first time in 4 years, rest felt like victory. Monday morning arrived with the kind of cold that cut through clothing and settled into bones. Sarah stood in the parking lot of the Guardian program facility at 0530, watching her breath form clouds in the November air. Behind her, the building was dark, waiting. In 2 hours, 20 veterans would walk through those doors looking for salvation they weren't sure existed, looking for proof that broken could be repaired, that warriors who couldn't fight anymore still had value, that the hard years after service could be survived. She wasn't sure she could give them that, wasn't sure anyone could, but Dutch had believed it was possible, and that belief had saved her life. The least she could do was try to pass it forward. Garrett's truck pulled into the lot at 0545. The former colonel looked different in civilian clothes, younger somehow, as if retirement had lifted a weight he'd been carrying for 30 years. He climbed out carrying 2 thermoses of coffee, handed one to Sarah without speaking. They stood together in the cold, drinking coffee, watching the sky lighten in the east. Somewhere on the base, soldiers were doing morning PT, running in formation, calling cadence. The eternal rhythm of military life, unchanging despite everything that changed around it. Ready for this? Garrett's question was rhetorical. Neither of them was ready. You couldn't be ready for the responsibility of holding broken people together while they figured out how to heal themselves. You just showed up and did your best. Dutch was. That's because Dutch had 50 years of mistakes to learn from. We're starting from scratch. Not scratch. Sarah pulled out the folder Dutch had left her, thick with notes and lesson plans and hard-won wisdom. We're starting from his foundation, building on what he learned so we don't have to learn it the hard way. They went inside as the first light of dawn touched the building, turned on lights, started coffee, arranged chairs in the main classroom. Sarah had spent the weekend preparing, but the space still felt empty, waiting for voices and stories and the messy work of transformation. At 0700, the first candidate arrived. Corporal James Mitchell, the file had said. 2 deployments, Bronze Star, discharged after assaulting an officer. Sarah recognized the walk immediately. The slight hitch in his left leg, the way his eyes scanned the room before entering, the controlled tension that never quite relaxed. Combat veteran, trained to see threats everywhere, unable to turn it off even when the war was over. Mitchell was 32, African-American, with the kind of lean build that suggested he'd been athletic before alcohol and depression had started carving him hollow. His handshake was firm, his eyes direct, testing her, measuring whether she was worth his time. Senior Chief Kincaid, his voice was careful, neutral. Sarah gestured to the coffee. Help yourself. We don't start until 0800. Mitchell poured coffee, added sugar, found a seat near the door. Escape route, Sarah noted. Still thinking tactically, still ready to run if this turned out to be another false promise. They came in 1s and 2s after that. Sergeants and specialists, corporals and privates, men and women ranging from late 20s to early 50s. All of them carrying the weight of service. All of them struggling with the aftermath. Sarah recognized the signs. The hypervigilance, the isolation, the careful control that barely masked the chaos underneath. At 0800 exactly, she closed the door and stood at the front of the room. 20 faces looked back at her, expectant and skeptical in equal measure. They'd been let down before, probably multiple times. The VA, civilian employers, family members who couldn't understand. They'd learned that promises were cheap and results were rare. My name is Sarah Kincaid. Most of you probably know that already. Know my service record. Know why I'm standing here instead of still being on active duty. She paused, let the silence stretch. No point in pretending to be something she wasn't. I'm a drunk. Or I was. 4 years sober as of last week, but that's new. Before that, I spent 3 years drinking myself to death because I couldn't figure out how to live with what I'd done and what had been done to me. I lost my marriage, lost my daughter, lost everything that mattered except the job keeping me alive one more day. The room was absolutely still. Sarah could see recognition in their eyes. They knew this story because they were living it. The man who created this program pulled me out of that hole. Master Sergeant Victor Brennan. Some of you might have known him. He died 2 weeks ago in Syria, bringing home a prisoner of war who'd been missing for 4 years. She let that settle. Several of the veterans shifted in their seats, recognizing the weight of that statement, understanding what it meant that Dutch had died in the field instead of in a hospital bed. Dutch believed that broken warriors still had something to give, that the skills we learned in combat, the perspective we gained from trauma, could be channeled into helping others. That's what this program is. Not therapy, not rehabilitation. Training, teaching you to take what broke you and use it to keep others from breaking the same way. A hand went up. Woman in the back, early 40s, with scars on her forearms that suggested suicide attempts. Staff Sergeant Linda Chen, the file had said. Army medic, 2 deployments, medical discharge after PTSD made it impossible for her to work in trauma situations. What's the success rate? Sarah appreciated the directness. Don't know yet. Program's brand new. You're the first class. Could work, could fail completely. But Dutch believed in it enough to spend his last years building it. I'm willing to honor that belief. Chen nodded, satisfied with the honesty. Around the room, Sarah saw similar reactions. These were people who'd been sold false hope too many times. They responded to truth, even uncomfortable truth. The first week is evaluation. We figure out where you are, what you need, what you can handle. Some of you will wash out. That's okay. Not everyone can be saved, and not everyone who can be saved is ready to be saved right now. No shame in that. Mitchell spoke up. What happens if we make it through? You become instructors, teaching other veterans, helping them process their trauma, training them to do the same for the next wave. You become the guardians, the ones who stand between broken warriors and total collapse. And if we fail, then you fail. Sarah's voice was gentle but firm. You go back to whatever you were doing before. We don't judge, don't punish. We just acknowledge that timing matters, that some battles can't be won right now. But the door stays open. You can try again when you're ready. The morning was spent on basics, physical assessments, psychological evaluations, skill inventories. Garrett ran the PT test while Sarah conducted interviews. Each veteran had a story, and Sarah listened to them all. The sergeant, who'd lost his fire team to an IED and couldn't stop blaming himself. The specialist, who'd killed a child combatant and couldn't reconcile duty with morality. The corporal who'd been sexually assaulted by her commanding officer and couldn't trust authority anymore. Stories of trauma wrapped in uniforms and rank, and the careful language warriors used to avoid admitting they were drowning. Sarah recognized every variation because she'd lived through her own version. The details changed, but the core remained the same. Something had broken under the weight of war, and no one had taught them how to carry the pieces. By lunch, 3 candidates had self-eliminated. One started having a panic attack during the PT test and couldn't continue. Another decided the program was too intense, too demanding. The third just walked out without explanation. Sarah let them go without judgment. Dutch had been right. Timing mattered. The remaining 17 ate lunch in the facility cafeteria, a space Garrett had set up with tables and an industrial coffee maker, and food that was simple but good. Sarah sat with them, not at the head of the table but mixed in, listening to their conversations, learning their rhythms, their humor, the ways they'd learned to cope. Mitchell ended up beside her, eating a sandwich with mechanical efficiency, the kind of eating that was about fuel rather than enjoyment. You really think we can do this? Learn to help people when we can't help ourselves. I think helping people is how we help ourselves. Sarah set down her coffee. Dutch taught me that. That purpose is healing. That feeling useful is sometimes more important than feeling good. What if we make things worse? What if we give someone bad advice and they hurt themselves? Then we learn from it and do better next time. Sarah met his eyes. Nobody gets this right on the first try. We're building something new here. There will be mistakes, probably catastrophic ones. But the alternative is doing nothing, letting warriors suffer because we're too scared to try something different. Mitchell nodded slowly. Fair enough. The afternoon brought the first real training session. Sarah stood at the front of the classroom. No notes, no PowerPoint, just her and 20 veterans who needed to understand what they were signing up for. You're going to learn 3 things in this program: how to recognize trauma, how to process your own trauma, and how to help others process theirs without taking on their burden. She walked to the whiteboard, wrote 3 words: recognize, process, protect. Recognize means understanding the signs: hypervigilance, avoidance, emotional numbing, intrusive memories. The way trauma manifests differently in different people. You'll learn to spot it in others because you'll learn to see it in yourselves. Process means doing the work: therapy, meditation, physical training, whatever tools work for you. You can't help others if you're still drowning. So we fix you first, or at least give you the skills to keep fixing yourself. Protect means boundaries, learning when to step in and when to step back. Understanding that you can't save everyone, that some people aren't ready to be saved. That failure doesn't make you a failure. Chen raised her hand. What if protecting means watching someone destroy themselves because they're not ready for help? Then you watch and you stay present and you make sure they know that when they are ready, you'll be there. Sarah's voice was steady. Dutch did that for me. Watched me drink for months, never judged, never pushed, just stayed present until I was ready to accept help. That's the hardest part of this work, the waiting. The week progressed in layers of difficulty. Physical training every morning, therapy sessions every afternoon, classroom work in between. Sarah brought in guest instructors, a psychiatrist who specialized in PTSD, a meditation teacher who'd been a Marine sniper, a family therapist who understood military culture. Garrett taught close quarters combat with a twist, not how to kill, but how to control without killing, how to de-escalate, how to restrain without causing injury, the skills Guardians needed when dealing with veterans in crisis. By Wednesday, 2 more candidates had washed out. One couldn't handle the therapy sessions, the memories too raw. Another got into a fight with Mitchell over something trivial, proving he wasn't ready to manage his anger. 15 remained. Thursday morning brought a surprise. Pierce appeared at the facility during PT, watched the candidates run laps around the building. He pulled Sarah aside afterward, his expression troubled. "We have a problem." Sarah felt ice in her stomach. Political blowback. She'd been expecting it. Senator Richardson's office has been asking questions about Dutch's death, about unauthorized operations in Syria, about black budget programs operating without congressional oversight. How bad? Bad enough that I'm being called to testify next week. They want to know about the Guardian program, want to see results that justify the funding. Pierce's jaw tightened. We're 3 days into the first class. We don't have results yet. What do you need from me? Keep doing what you're doing. Build something that works. Because if this fails, if these candidates don't turn into something valuable, the program gets shut down and everyone involved gets investigated. Pierce looked at the candidates finishing their run. Dutch died believing this mattered. Prove him right. After Pierce left, Sarah gathered the remaining 15 candidates in the classroom, told them the truth about the political pressure, about the timeline, about the stakes. She'd learned from Dutch that warriors responded to honesty, even when the honesty was uncomfortable. We have 2 months to prove this program works. 2 months to turn you into instructors capable of helping other veterans. The timeline sucks, the pressure is unrealistic, and we might fail. But we're going to try anyway. Mitchell spoke up. What happens if we fail? The program gets shut down. You go back to whatever you were doing before. And warriors who need help don't get it because politicians decided it wasn't worth the investment. The room was silent. Sarah could see the weight settling on them, the understanding that this was bigger than their individual healing, that they were test cases for something that could help thousands of veterans if it succeeded and would help no one if it failed. No pressure, right? Chen's dark humor broke the tension. Laughter rippled through the room. Not happy laughter, but the kind that came from warriors facing impossible odds and choosing to fight it anyway. They worked harder after that. PT sessions became more intense. Therapy sessions went deeper. The candidates pushed themselves and each other, driven by the understanding that failure wasn't just personal anymore. It was systemic. Friday arrived with the kind of nervous anticipation that preceded combat. Sarah stood in front of her closet at 0500, trying to decide what to wear to her daughter's school presentation. The uniform felt too formal, too much. Civilian clothes felt too casual, not showing proper respect. She finally settled on slacks and a blazer. Professional, but approachable. Rachel found her in the kitchen, drinking coffee with hands that shook slightly. You're going to be fine. What if she changed her mind? What if she doesn't want me there? Then you respect that and try again later. Rachel kissed her forehead. But you show up first. You keep the promise. Sarah drove to Virginia through morning traffic, her mind cycling between the Guardian program candidates and Emma and the fragile hope that maybe, possibly, she could rebuild what she'd destroyed. The school was the same one she'd watched from her truck weeks ago, but entering the building felt different. This time she wasn't hiding. This time she'd been invited. The presentation was in the gymnasium, set up with folding chairs and a small stage. Parents and family members filed in, taking seats, chatting with neighbors. Sarah found a spot in the back, not wanting to presume she belonged in the front with the involved parents. Then Emma saw her. Sarah watched her daughter's face cycle through emotions. surprise, uncertainty, something that might have been hope. Emma said something to the teacher, then walked across the gym to where Sarah stood. She was taller than Sarah remembered, almost as tall as her mother now, growing up fast, becoming a person Sarah barely knew. The guilt of that hit like a physical blow. You came. I promised. Sarah's voice caught. Thank you for letting me. They stood awkwardly for a moment, neither sure how to bridge 2 years of silence. Finally, Emma gestured to a seat in the front row. I saved you a spot, just in case. The presentation was about military families, about the sacrifices made by those who served and those who waited at home. Emma spoke clearly, confidently about her father's service, about what it meant to grow up in a military household. She didn't mention Sarah directly, but the subtext was clear. The cost of service wasn't just measured in those who deployed. It was measured in those left behind. When the presentation ended, Sarah stood and applauded with everyone else. Emma found her afterward, her face flushed with success and nerves. What did you think? I think you're brilliant, Sarah's voice was thick. I think you've grown into an amazing person despite having a mother who wasn't there. Emma's expression softened slightly. You're here now. I am. And I want to keep being here if you'll let me. They went to lunch at a diner near the school, one of those places with checkered tablecloths and a menu that hadn't changed in 30 years. Ordered burgers and fries and milkshakes, the kind of meal that was about comfort rather than nutrition. Tell me about school, about your friends, about everything I've missed. Emma talked, hesitant at first, then more freely as she realized Sarah was actually listening. About her best friend Jessica, about the math teacher who made calculus interesting, about trying out for soccer and making the varsity team. Normal things, everyday things, the small details that made up a life. Sarah listened and hurt and was grateful all at once. Hurt because she'd missed so much, because these stories should have been shared in real time instead of summarized over a single lunch. Grateful because Emma was sharing them now, was giving her a chance to be part of her life again. Mom, why did you disappear? The question came between bites of burger, casual delivery of something that had probably been building for 2 years. Sarah set down her milkshake, took a breath, chose honesty. Because I was broken and didn't know how to be fixed. Because watching you grow up reminded me of all the ways I'd failed as a mother. Because it was easier to run away than to face the disappointment in your eyes. I wasn't disappointed. I was scared. Emma's voice cracked. I thought you didn't love me anymore. Thought I'd done something wrong. God, no. Sarah reached across the table, took her daughter's hand. You didn't do anything wrong. This was all me. My trauma, my failure to get help, my choice to drown instead of swim. You deserve better than that. Do I get better now? I'm trying. Sarah squeezed her hand. I can't promise I won't mess up again. I'm still learning how to be a functioning person. But I promise I'll keep showing up, keep trying, keep choosing you instead of choosing the easy way out. Okay. Emma wiped her eyes. But Mom, if you disappear again, that's it. I can forgive once. I can't keep forgiving. I understand. They finished lunch talking about safer topics. The weather, Emma's upcoming soccer game, Sarah's new position running the Guardian program. Building bridges one conversation at a time, learning each other again after 2 years of silence. When Sarah dropped Emma back at school, her daughter hugged her. Brief, awkward, but genuine. The kind of hug that said maybe, possibly, there was a future here worth fighting for. Drive safe, Mom. I will. I love you, Emma. I know, Emma smiled slightly. I'm starting to believe that again. Sarah drove back to Fort Bragg with her vision blurred by tears, her chest tight with emotions she'd kept locked down for too long. Relief and grief and hope all mixed together in a cocktail that was overwhelming and necessary. She pulled over twice just to cry, to let out the pressure that had been building. Rachel was waiting at the facility when Sarah arrived, took one look at her face and pulled her into a hug without asking questions. Sometimes love was knowing when words weren't needed, when presence was enough. How did it go? Hard. Good. Sarah pulled back, wiping her eyes. She gave me another chance. Now I have to prove I deserve it. You will. Rachel's faith was absolute, one day at a time. The following Monday brought the 2-month mark of the Guardian program. 15 candidates remained, all of them showing progress in different ways. Mitchell had started therapy, was learning to process his anger. Chen had reconnected with her family, was rebuilding relationships she'd thought were destroyed. Others were working through their own demons, making slow progress toward functionality. Pierce appeared that afternoon with a congressional aide in tow. The young man looked overwhelmed, taking notes on everything, asking questions that revealed he understood nothing about military culture or veteran struggles. Sarah led them through the facility, explaining the curriculum, introducing them to candidates who were willing to talk. Mitchell stepped up, spoke about how the program had given him tools to manage his PTSD. Chen talked about learning to help others as a way of helping herself. The aide asked about metrics, about quantifiable results, about return on investment. Sarah wanted to punch him, wanted to explain that you couldn't quantify healing, couldn't put a dollar value on preventing a suicide, couldn't measure the worth of giving broken warriors purpose again. Instead, she showed him the numbers Dutch had compiled. Statistics on veteran suicide rates, employment struggles, family dissolution. Then she showed him the preliminary data from their first class. Reduced alcohol consumption, improved family relationships, candidates reporting decreased PTSD symptoms. The aide seemed satisfied, made more notes, promised to include their findings in the senator's report. Pierce walked him out, then returned to Sarah's office. How bad? Could be worse. Pierce sat heavily. Richardson wants results faster, but he's not calling for immediate shutdown. We have breathing room, maybe another 3 months. After that, you need success stories. Candidates who've gone on to help other veterans demonstrably. We'll have them. Pierce studied her face. You've changed. Since Syria, since Dutch died, you're different. I'm what he trained me to be. A guardian. Sarah met his eyes. Someone who stands between broken people and total collapse. That's all this program is. Warriors helping warriors survive the aftermath. Dutch would be proud. After Pierce left, Sarah walked through the facility, observing training sessions, checking on candidates. The building had come alive in 2 months, transformed from an empty shell into a place where healing happened. Not fast, not easy, but real. She found Garrett in the gym, working with 3 candidates on de-escalation techniques. The former colonel had taken to teaching with unexpected enthusiasm. His rigid certainty transformed into patient instruction. He saw Sarah watching, nodded acknowledgement, continued the lesson. Later, over coffee in her office, he spoke about transformation. I spent 30 years thinking discipline could fix anything. That if warriors just followed the rules, maintained standards, stayed strong, they'd be okay. Garrett's voice was quiet. It never occurred to me that the rules themselves might be part of the problem. That maybe we needed to build something new instead of enforcing something broken. Dutch figured that out faster than most. He had Vietnam to teach him. I needed Syria. Needed to watch a good man die trying to fix his mistakes. Garrett looked out the window at candidates running PT. These people, they're not broken. They're injured. There's a difference. That's what Dutch said. He was right, and it's taken me 30 years to understand what he knew from the beginning. The weeks blurred together. Training, evaluation, therapy, progress measured in inches rather than miles. Sarah split her time between the Guardian program and rebuilding her relationship with Emma. Drove to Virginia every Friday, never missed a soccer game, sent text messages every day just to maintain contact, building trust through consistency, proving through action that she'd changed. Rachel moved in without ceremony, her clothes appearing in Sarah's closet gradually, until one day Sarah realized they lived together. The domesticity of it was strange, wonderful, terrifying. Learning to share space with someone who saw your worst moments and chose to stay anyway. Hawk was released from medical care in late December, cleared for limited duty. He moved into base housing, started physical therapy, began the long process of rebuilding a life that had been on hold for 4 years. Cole visited twice a week, their conversations awkward but genuine. Father and son learning each other, building a relationship from nothing. Christmas came and went. Sarah spent it with Emma and Rachel, the 3 of them navigating the holiday with careful courtesy. Emma still didn't fully trust her mother, but the walls were coming down. Slowly, painfully, but undeniably. January brought the first graduation from the Guardian program. 12 candidates had made it through, 3 having washed out along the way. They stood in formation in the facility gym, wearing civilian clothes but standing military straight. Sarah addressed them from a small podium, Pierce and Garrett flanking her. You came here broken. Some of you more than others. Some of you barely functional, drinking away memories, destroying relationships, wondering if suicide was easier than fighting. Sarah's voice carried across the silent gym. You're leaving here different, not fixed. Healing isn't something that gets completed, but better, stronger, armed with tools to manage your trauma instead of being managed by it. She looked at each face, remembering their stories, their struggles, their small victories. Your job now is to do for others what this program did for you. Find warriors who are drowning, throw them a line, teach them what you learn. Help them understand that broken isn't finished, that there's life after trauma, that purpose can be found even in pain. Mitchell stepped forward, representing the graduating class. He'd been elected by his peers, a recognition of how far he'd come. Senior Chief, we wanted you to know something. This program saved our lives, not metaphorically, actually saved us. Several people in this room were planning to eat their gun before they got the call about Guardian. He paused, emotion thickening his voice. Master Sergeant Brennan built this. You made it real. Between the two of you, you gave us a reason to stay alive. We won't forget that. Sarah felt tears burning, but held them back. Dutch's sacrifice, his vision, his stubborn belief that broken warriors could be salvaged. It was working, imperfect, incomplete, but working. After the ceremony, Pierce pulled her aside. The senator's office called. They want you to testify before the Armed Services Committee about the program, about veteran suicide prevention, about why this model should be expanded. When? Next month, February 15th. Pierce's expression was serious. This is your chance to secure funding, to expand beyond Fort Bragg, to make Dutch's vision permanent. Don't screw it up. No pressure. Never is. Pierce almost smiled. For what it's worth, I think you're ready. You've built something real here, something that works. That night, Sarah sat in her living room with Rachel, staring at the notes she'd been making for her congressional testimony. The weight of it was crushing. 12 successful graduates weren't enough to prove the program worked at scale. She needed more data, more success stories, more proof that the investment was worthwhile. Rachel's hand found hers. You're going to be brilliant. What if I'm not? What if I can't convince them? Then you try again and again until they listen or until you run out of breath. Rachel's voice was fierce. This matters too much to give up. February 15th arrived with snow falling over Washington, D.C. Sarah stood outside the Senate building in her dress uniform, the Navy cross heavy on her chest, feeling like an imposter. She was a warrior, not a politician. She understood violence and trauma and survival, not bureaucracy and appropriations, and the careful dance of congressional testimony. Garrett appeared beside her, also in uniform, his chest carrying the weight of 30 years of service. They'd been enemies once. Now they stood together, united in purpose. Ready? No, but let's do it anyway. The hearing room was intimidating. Senators arranged in a semicircle on an elevated platform, looking down at witnesses like judges passing sentence. Staffers and reporters filled the gallery, their phones recording everything. Sarah took her seat at the witness table, adjusted the microphone, and waited. Senator Richardson, the committee chairman, opened with prepared remarks about veteran suicide rates and the need for innovative solutions. Then he turned to Sarah. Senior Chief Kincaid, explain to this committee why the Guardian program deserves continued funding. Sarah spoke for 20 minutes, explained the curriculum, the methodology, the philosophy, talked about Dutch, about his vision, about the 12 graduates who were now helping other veterans, presented data on suicide prevention, employment improvement, family reconciliation. Then she told the truth. This program works because it treats warriors as warriors, not as patients. It acknowledges that combat changes people, that trauma is real, that coming home is sometimes harder than deploying, and it gives broken people purpose again, teaches them that their suffering can be used to prevent someone else's suffering. Senator Patricia Morrison, a Democrat from California, leaned forward. How do we know these instructors won't make things worse? That they won't give dangerous advice to vulnerable veterans? Because we train them extensively, because we supervise them closely, and because they understand trauma from the inside, which makes them better equipped to recognize crisis than therapists who've never seen combat. The questioning continued for another hour. Some senators were supportive, others skeptical. Sarah answered everything honestly, not hiding the program's limitations or challenges. Dutch had taught her that warriors responded to truth. Apparently senators did too, at least the good ones. When it was over, Richardson thanked her for her testimony and promised a decision within 30 days. Sarah left the hearing room exhausted, uncertain, hoping she'd done enough. The call came 3 weeks later. Pierce delivered the news personally, appearing at the Guardian program facility with an expression Sarah couldn't read. The committee voted to expand the program. Full funding for 3 years, authorization to establish facilities at 5 additional bases, budget for 30 instructors. Sarah sat down hard in her chair. We did it. You did it. Pierce's smile was genuine. Dutch's legacy is secure. The Guardian program is official policy now. The question is whether you're ready to scale it up. I don't know if I'm ready, but I'm willing to try. That's all anyone can ask. 6 months later, the Guardian program graduated its 4th class. 43 candidates had completed training, all of them now working as instructors at facilities across the country. Suicide prevention hotlines were reporting decreased call volumes from veterans who'd gone through Guardian training. Employment rates were up. Family reconciliation rates were improving. The numbers were good, but for Sarah, the moments that mattered were smaller. Mitchell working with a Marine who'd lost his whole fire team, helping him process survivor guilt. Chen training a Navy corpsman who couldn't handle civilian medical work anymore, showing her how to channel trauma into teaching. Graduates of the program finding purpose and helping others find purpose. Dutch's vision made real. Sarah stood at Arlington National Cemetery on a cool spring morning, placing flowers on Dutch's grave. The headstone was still simple, still gave no hint of what he'd accomplished. But that was okay. Warriors didn't need public recognition. They needed to know their sacrifice mattered, that the mission succeeded, that the people they tried to save were actually saved. Master Sergeant, I kept my promise. The program works. We're saving warriors one at a time, building guardians who'll do the same for the next generation. She saluted the grave, held it longer than regulation required. Behind her, footsteps approached. Sarah turned to find Hawk and Cole standing together, father and son, rebuilding their relationship slowly but genuinely. Thought we'd find you here. Hawk's voice was stronger now, his body recovered from captivity, his mind healing. He'd started working as a Guardian instructor last month, using his experience as a POW to help others process trauma. I come every week. Sarah gestured to the grave. Keeps me honest, reminds me what we're fighting for. Cole stepped forward, placed his own flowers beside Sarah's. I wish I'd known him. You would have liked him. Sarah put a hand on the young man's shoulder. He was stubborn, hard-headed, made terrible decisions in his personal life, but he never stopped trying to do better. Never gave up on building something worth leaving behind. That's what you're doing now. Cole's voice was quiet, building what he started. Sarah looked at the grave, at the simple stone marking a complex life. We're all building it. Every graduate, every instructor, every veteran who chooses to keep living because someone showed them how. That's Dutch's legacy. Not the missions he ran or the enemies he killed. The warriors he saved by teaching them to save each other. They stood together in silence. 3 warriors bound by loss and purpose, and the stubborn refusal to let Dutch's death be meaningless. Around them, Arlington stretched in endless rows of white stones. Thousands of lives, thousands of sacrifices, thousands of stories that would never be fully known. But they'd known Dutch, and they'd carry his mission forward until their own stones joined his in the earth. That evening, Sarah drove to Emma's soccer game. Her daughter had made varsity, was starting midfielder, played with a fierce determination that reminded Sarah of herself at that age. Rachel sat beside her in the stands, their hands linked, comfortable in a way that still surprised Sarah sometimes. Emma scored in the second half, a beautiful shot that found the upper corner of the net. She looked into the stands, found her mother's face, smiled. Not the guarded smile of someone testing the waters, the genuine smile of someone who'd learned to trust again. After the game, Emma ran over, still sweaty and flushed with victory. Good game. Sarah pulled her daughter into a hug, no longer awkward, no longer tentative. Thanks for coming, Mom. Emma squeezed back. Every week you're here. Every week for 6 months. I promised. I know. And you kept it. Emma pulled back, her expression serious. I think I'm ready to forgive you. Really forgive you, not just say it. Sarah felt tears burning. You don't have to. I want to. Because you changed. You got better. You chose me. Emma's voice was fierce. That matters. That's worth forgiving. They went to dinner together, the 3 of them, Sarah and Rachel and Emma. Talked about school and soccer and the Guardian program. Built the foundation of something that might eventually become a real family. Not perfect, not without scars, but real. Sarah drove home that night through streets she'd driven drunk countless times, when living felt impossible and dying felt easier. She thought about all the choices that had led to this moment. The choice to accept Dutch's help, the choice to stop drinking, the choice to face her failures instead of running from them, the choice to keep showing up, keep trying, keep believing that broken could be repaired. Rachel was waiting at home, having gone ahead to start dinner. Sarah found her in the kitchen, chopping vegetables, humming something under her breath, domestic and peaceful, and everything Sarah had thought she'd lost forever. "Thank you." Rachel looked up. "For what?" "For not giving up on me when I'd given up on myself." Rachel set down the knife, crossed to where Sarah stood, wrapped her arms around her. "That's what we do. We hold each other up until we're strong enough to stand alone. Then we choose to keep holding anyway because alone is overrated." They stood like that for a long moment. Two people who'd found each other in the wreckage and built something worth keeping. Outside, Fort Bragg was settling into evening, soldiers heading home or heading out, the eternal rhythm of military life continuing as it always had. But inside Sarah's home, something new was growing. Not perfect, not easy, but real and solid and worth fighting for. The hard-won piece of warriors who'd survived the war and learned to survive the aftermath. The easy days were over. They'd been over since Raqqa, since Dutch died, since everything shattered and had to be rebuilt from pieces. But maybe that was okay. Maybe the hard days were where you found out what you were made of, where you learned that strength wasn't about never falling, but about getting up every time you fell. Sarah closed her eyes and let herself feel grateful. For Rachel, for Emma, for the Guardian Program graduates who were out there right now helping other veterans survive. For Dutch, who'd seen something in her worth saving and had died making sure that salvation stuck. The Guardians were standing watch now. Not perfect, not invincible, but present and determined and absolutely refusing to let another warrior fall without someone there to catch them. That was legacy enough. That was everything.